trying to figure out a way how to discuss it.
I would even, I mean, even tell the company said,
Yeah, it's 40 minutes. Yeah, that we can go with that. And,
We'll go with that.
I just there's only a few ways that I can say things under an NDA, right?
Yep.
We didn't get paid for a little bit.
Yeah.
It's because we didn't get our funding. And we can just leave it at that, I guess.
yeah, I think. That's the thing recently, is if you take a little bit of a risk, and like startups are just different. Right, like. Same kind of situation, when we raise some capital. But pretty capital intensive. Environment or in just in the kind of great.
Yeah, find a chair that works for you, buddy.
Yeah.
So Rod, for years, I would get questions from students about some of the firms that my private equity firm invested in, or some of our investors. And like you, there's just lots of things you really should not say, right? Any details. So I just took the attitude of, I told them something that's not necessarily true. And that is, look, I'd love to talk about that, but in private equity, we don't talk about our investors or our investments. Now, they believed that, by the way, because they were students, but that killed all the questions. And that was what I was trying to get to.
Yeah.
Which, is not necessarily true that you don't talk about.
That doesn't make sense.
No, it's not always true.
Yeah.
It is sometimes true, but not
I
always.
think there's a little more discretion in private equity.
Depends on the level of fund. The big Black Rocks and such, it's all publicly disclosed, right? But your office is essentially a private equity fund, and you don't talk an awful lot about the investor or the investments.
Yeah, I talk about what I need to when I need to.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
As an engineer, startups was great, right? You wear tons of hats, you get to learn a million and one things, you're going nonstop. It's full stress 100% of the time, but it's good stress. Yeah. As C-suite or anybody who's trying to raise money, that company or really any of those companies just sound like.
Okay, so they remember calculator, do I need to get another one or this is work?
If you know how to
I
use
enjoy
that,
being
it'll work.
Okay.
If you don't know the time value,
Great friends.
keystrokes and sequence,
Well, better than get another one.
yeah, get another one.
Because you're gonna get instructions.
Absolutely, and I have one of those, but I don't use it, and I don't remember the keystrokes.
I see, okay.
So I can't teach it.
Okay, I'm gonna get it for the next part.
Or make mine one day. I might do it.
Who are you working for?
Parker, everything?
Good for you. What are you doing? Say again? Yep.
Don't give away your company.
I was thought to go to financial firm, but because I have no experience, they kind of pay.
Well, you had a job. You were already working full time, weren't you?
And I kind of pay rate, they was kind of recommend me, like I couldn't afford.
Yeah.
So I decided to stay in the kind of production and kind of go in supply chain.
And you're married now?
Yeah.
Were you married then, or is this
No,
recent?
Just like, in July 25 will be a year.
Good for you.
Thank you.
Good for you.
I'm in strategy. So.
Where are our partners in crime?
Probably lost. 4 minutes.
Way more people should have one.
We should have, well, Catherine's sick, Saif should be here. Alex should be here, Tomas should be here. I don't know, there's a gentleman, Kishiguyan? I don't know how to pronounce that. This is Saif. Rod, you've got access to campus, right?
I do.
Okay, and you're in the class?
Yes.
Good. I just want to show you something. Good. It's the old word.
I understand.
Okay. We'll be able to see if you all this time. Not quizzes or answers. We're not going to see. We're not going to see. I didn't do that directly. As soon as I realized I was interrupting you on a vacation, I decided to take a different tack. Well, I felt like I was. So thank you though. So, Daniel Lewis, who's the head of our advancement office, has a direct connection with Curtis, who is the head of your foundation, right?
Yeah.
And so Daniel and I were speaking, and Daniel said, well, look, let me reach out to Curtis.
Yeah.
And he did, and then Cos will be the one of the two keynotes. And he'll be talking about one-time act.
So everything's.
We're good to go, which is
Right.
why I didn't harass you any further.
No.
Well, and I felt bad the first time. No, honest, one of the arrangements I have with a couple of your brothers is I'm the guy that's never gonna ask you for something. Other people, because they think things, they will ask you for things. I'm the guy that doesn't ask you for things.
I might want to talk to you a little bit further on that at a separate time, because that's not typically how I operate. I'm available
I know.
anytime I'm not inebriated, I am available 24/7.
Okay, that's fair. I don't want to hear about the rest of it. I'm not your confessor. Saif, he's your confessor.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And he knows stuff, and he never forgets either, by the way.
Oh, okay, well then maybe not my.
Yeah, maybe not.
Both an interruption, there was, most of the trip was mainly eating a lot of good food and.
Where were you?
Puerto Vallarta.
I've never been there.
I assumed it was gonna be a party town, it's not, it is a
Good.
resort.
Okay.
I had to plan all of it myself, but it was still well worth it. It was gorgeous.
Good for you.
Food was.
Alex? Do any of you know the student whose last name looks like Curlin? You know this person? Well, good question. KHISHIGBUYAN. Maybe? I don't know the student.
Christian.
Yeah, okay. Okay, well, look, it's 6 o'clock. I appreciate you guys being here on time. I'm always gonna try to start us on time. Alex and Saif, you might have a better experience being over here in the lane where this is not your way.
Yeah.
You're not gonna have to use these computers. You're probably gonna want to use a computer, yours a lot of the time, but you're not gonna have to use these. It may be better for you to be over here in the lane.
Then we will use our computers or the both ones?
Yours. Yeah. And which room was it that you guys was scheduled for this class? Is it upstairs or is it right over here?
134.
134?
Yeah. 134.
Okay, give me just 1 minute. I just want to make sure nobody's sitting there.
I'm looking for like the same way.
There's
one, yeah.
yeah, there's one big one, like more than one.
If we can have to take one of those, right?
Yeah.
For here.
Are you looking at plugs?
Yeah.
So if you go down underneath these, you're gonna find, you pull out that panel, you're gonna find some electrical outlets in there. Usually.
I think that's.
Do you see any, Dimitri?
Okay, it's on another side.
Well, they're around somewhere.
Let's see what I'm not. If I try to go. What's happening?
Alex is getting experience in construction.
He is.
Probably talking houses.
Hey, Tomas.
How are you?
Good.
Okay. Good.
Yeah, if you're over there, this thing's gonna be in your way sometimes. It can be easier for you.
What kind of computer wants to take this out?
I mean, we can put it back, you know, right?
No. It's probably good now.
No.
I want this.
Take it like that slot.
He's fine.
It's fine. I got it.
So as I indicated a few minutes ago, I know Catherine's not feeling well tonight, and Tomas, I know you agreed to take some notes for her. I'm actually recording class tonight as well. And I just sent her the link to the Zoom. She might join us by Zoom.
Okay.
I don't want that to set a precedence here, by the way. In fact, I want it to not set a precedence. Doing as much board work as we're gonna do, doing as much screen work, does not make this class conducive to Zoom. And the conversations that we need to have are kind of stifled when we're on Zoom as well. So I'm doing this because I know Catherine really is sick, and for me, if I missed the first class of any class when I was in college, I was screwed. To me, the first class was the setup, and I understood where we were going from there, the whole bit. And if I didn't get that, I was in deep trouble, and I don't want Catherine to be in that level of trouble. I hope that's okay with you guys. Okay. So other than Catherine, there's only one other individual. It's the person whose name I can't pronounce. Not in that room, not responding to text. We're gonna start. Fair enough. I will try to always start on time for you, which means I want you to always start on time for us. Okay. Most of you, well, really all of you, know me, or at least well enough to know that, you know, a little bit about me and a little bit about my style. But just remember that in this class, I'm telling you about things that I think are relevant and meaningful to making business level decisions, financial decisions, not HR decisions necessarily. Okay, business level financial decisions. We're going to use some models, some financial models, and some structural constructs to think about how do we make these decisions, and what becomes a good decision versus a bad decision. We're going to talk about real things. I won't give you names of companies that I've worked with. I won't give you very many details of specific decisions, but you'll see some problem sets. We'll talk about we'll do some Excel modeling together, and recognize that behind every one of these is some real company that I just don't feel comfortable giving you the real names, and I maybe even stylize some of the numbers, change the proportionalities and that kind of thing. Okay. I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that this will be interesting to you. You know, if numbers aren't your thing, and they aren't everybody, then this may be a little bit challenging. Okay. If numbers are your thing, it's still going to be a little challenging. You're going to find, if you talk to your peers in this program, that this class is one of the two hardest courses in the sequence. The other one is Elise Morton's Managing Processes class. And if you've already had that class, then you'll have something to compare this one to. If you haven't had that class, well, you'll have something to look forward to. I will admit that this class has difficulty primarily because of the volume of what I want you to try to get through. Not reading, but modeling. there will be a couple of assignments virtually every week. And they are not for the faint of heart. I'm going to walk you through how to approach them, okay? And then you'll see a pattern emerge here very rapidly, where you'll say, oh, that makes sense. And Dimitri, you had my Finance 309 and my Finance 495 class. So you understand some of that pattern already. You're even going to recognize some of these assignments, but the other part that I know is you're not going to remember enough of the details of them. So you're going to struggle just as badly as Tomas or Saidi for anybody else, okay? He's got a tiny leg up, but only a tiny leg up. I dig this stuff. I probably dig it irrationally more than I should. I think the reason I like it is because I didn't understand numbers when I was young. In my undergraduate program at BYU, the highest level of math we needed to have was pre-algebra. This was even before, sadly, before everybody had to take college algebra. That's how long ago I did my undergraduate, right? So I had to take pre-algebra, and I was happy for that because I was not a numbers guy. Some of you that have come to know me well over the last number of years might hear me say that and think, are you kidding me? Okay, this is my point. Because I seem to be just a numbers guy. And in fact, I struggled to understand numbers. I didn't learn higher order math, higher order algebra, or even calculus until I was well into my 50s, when I did my master's work at the U. And I engaged a young man by the name of Kian Toro, who incidentally was born and raised in Tehran, and is one of my closest friends today. And he was in a biotech program and doing his doctoral work at the time. And he just happened to be a great tutor. So he and I met in his apartment at 6:30 every Tuesday and Thursday morning for a year and a half. And I mean every Tuesday and Thursday morning. And we'd spend an hour or an hour and a half together, and I would do homework almost every night when I would come home from my business. I still owned my businesses at the time, so I was working 60, 70 hours a week, like you do when you own your businesses. And I would do my homework, and he took me from pre-algebra to Calc 3 in a year and a half. And he would say that's because I was disciplined, and I would say it's because he was a great teacher. And maybe there's a combination there, but that's where I learned about math. When I realized that numbers simply were the lexicon of a language, I was good to go. Until then, I was just befuddled, bemused, and confused, intimidated, terribly intimidated. There will be times in this class where you might be frustrated with some of the numbers. You probably won't be as frustrated as, hey, come on in. You're going to want to sit here in the lane somewhere, maybe even right here, because otherwise you sit over there, this is going to be in your way. Okay. So when I did my master's work, I took my classes at night. And my master's is in economics. And again, I was in my mid-50s when I did my master's work. And so it'd been like 30 years almost since I'd been in college, right? And I wasn't a great undergraduate student. They let me graduate because they were tired of seeing me around. And well, that because I made a great big donation. So they said, okay, fine, we'll let him graduate. I had a class from a woman by the name of Kadrina Rada, and it was a multivariate statistical measurement class. It was looking at statistical modeling in linear algebra and matrix algebra form, which you might know you do in R or Stata or those kinds of things. But Kadrina was old school, so she made us do it with matrices, 2x2 and 3x3 matrices by hand, so we could learn how. And once we knew how to do it by hand, she then let us use the programs. So here I am. I'm in my mid-50s. I'm in my graduate program. I am running my own business. We're doing very well as a business. I had already contracted to sell it, and then I knew that when I finished that sale, it was going to be a happy day at the Haskell household. But even with that, I would leave Kadrina's class about 9 or 9:30 at night, one night a week. And I'd go sit in my car. I'd cry for a while, literally, I'm not kidding you, until I get myself together again enough to go home. That's how frustrated I was at trying to grapple numbers at that level that early on. I don't think any of you are going to have that level of frustration. But in this class, I've constructed a number of things to try to avoid those levels of frustration for you. For example, and we'll look at all of these in some pretty good detail here in a few minutes. But an example, virtually every one of the assignments you have a problem set, and I give you the solution set. You have a visual representation, at the very least, of what the Excel model looks like, cell by cell, of how I came up with the answers. What you don't have in those cells in the model, you don't have the equations. You don't have the functions. You don't have the formulas. You have the numbers. And we're going to be talking about how you get the outcomes, right? And if you know what the outcome is supposed to be quantitatively, and if you've been in a class where we've talked about how you get that outcome, and some of them are very commonsensical, and some of them are a little bit more technical, right? If you understand that, if you've been with us, then figuring out how to get that number is easier because you know what the number is. And if you use a construct that doesn't get that number, that's the wrong way to do it. And if you find the model or the equational structure and it gives you that number, well, you probably did it right. So that's one of the ways in which I try to keep you from having some of those frustrations. Here's another way. You're going to find when we go through the assignments here in a few minutes that I'm giving you an assignment to organize yourself into a study group or study groups. I think I've given you the option to become one person in one of 3 possible study groups. If you guys decide that you all want to be together in one group, that's fine with me. If you want to be in 2 or 3 groups, that's fine with me. I'm not even going to follow up with you to see whether or not you're using your groups. I'm simply motivating the use of groups by requiring you to organize them, and you are adults. If you're going to use them, great. If you're not going to use them, that's your problem. But here's why I would use them. Alex and I and Jeremy are working on an assignment one night. It's got 3 different worksheets that are interactive, 2 of which we made over the prior couple of weeks. And these things have been building on each other. And we're trying to figure out how to come up with that number. Jeremy remembers no plat equals blah, blah, blah. Jeremiah, sorry. I said Jeremy 3 times now, haven't I? Well, you should have corrected me the first time. So I'm going to turn this around to it being your fault. Okay.
You said it twice.
Okay. Okay. Jeremiah. Sorry, Jeremiah. So he knows that no plat equals X, Y, Z. Alex remembers that free cash flow equals ABC. I remember some other element of this. And together, we might immediately recognize, oh, the connective tissue is EBIT. Of course it's EBIT. What was I thinking? It was only one of 1,000 little details. I don't know why you didn't think of it immediately, right? Because it was one of 1,000 little details. Doing all of this work simply by yourself will be meaningfully more difficult than doing as much of it together as you can. If for no other reason, then you've got somebody to look at and you start to say, Alex, and he says, come on, it's EBIT. And oh, of course it's EBIT. Okay. So those are a couple of things that I do. We utilize WhatsApp in the class. Some of you, I think most of you are already part of the WhatsApp group. The rest of you, I've given you an assignment that I'll show you in a few minutes to get into a WhatsApp group. That's not because I like to have a text stream with you, although, well, frankly, I don't care. But it helps because if Tomas has a question and he goes to ask it maybe on a Sunday afternoon, which I have to promise you, even though I'm paying attention to my texts and WhatsApp on Sundays, I've got other things going on. I don't immediately respond on a Sunday. I might respond at some point later that night. I might not respond until the next day. Sunday is my day with my family. Okay. The rest of the time I try to be as responsive and as timely as I can, which means sometimes I'm right there and sometimes it takes me days. But I always triage them. If it looks immediately urgent, I will deal with it immediately, except for on Sunday. So Tomas is working on something. He has a question. He throws it out on WhatsApp, and I don't answer it. But Saif sees the question and he knows the answer. Answer the question. Or Jeremiah, formerly known as Jeremy, goes through a question out there and realizes, oh, wait a minute, Tomas just asked that question and Saif answered it. That's the utility of WhatsApp for us. Oh, I'll call audibles on it. I'll share files on it. You'll give me some input on it. And so, but its best utility is that collaborative mechanism that cuts down on a lot of the time that we might waste with you waiting for me, or worse, me waiting for you, right? Are we good on all that? Okay, so what I want to do tonight is I want to make sure that we understand where we're going to go in the class. We're going to go through Canvas. I'm going to show you how it's organized and such. Those of you that have had classes from me before, it's organized exactly like I organize my classes. And we'll go through the syllabus. We'll spend enough time there that you understand the contract that you're making, because that's what the syllabus is. My contract to you, your contract to me. here's the thing I love about the syllabus. It says that for my part, it's subject to change. Doesn't say that your part of the contract is subject to change. So I get to change the rules, you don't. I dig this. I try not to change the rules. And if I do have to change anything, you'll find that it's relevant, it's commonsensical. And if I need to give it more time on something, I do that. I try to be very fair about it. We're going to go through all that. We'll take a couple of minutes of break, maybe clear your mind, and then we've got a whole list of stuff to start working. Fair enough? Okay. You're gonna have to help me out. I know all these other criminals here, and I don't know you. And I don't know how to pronounce your name, and we were having a debate earlier, and we've been making bets on how to pronounce your first name.
The first name is called Chickboy, but my friends and family call me Chris. So.
Oh, bless your heart.
Yeah.
Chris?
Yeah.
And so how do we pronounce the actual name?
Chickboy.
Chickboy. Yeah, that was close to what I think you said, isn't it? Yeah. Chris. Where are you from?
Molia.
Very good. Well, thanks. I'm glad you're here. Okay. Okay, so let's open up. Well, we're going to start in the syllabus. And so I've got it up on screen. The syllabus is linked in Canvas. I believe I sent it to you sometime in the last 24 or 48 hours. We're not going to go through every jot and tittle of this deal. Hey, look, you got my contact information. Use it. My cell phone, I don't answer phone calls unless you're my wife or my children. I recognize them. You don't look like them. I'm not going to answer yours almost certainly. But it's my text number, and I am religious about responding to text as soon as I can. And my text number and my WhatsApp number are the same numbers. Okay. I don't have office hours for this class that I publish because they would be in the day, and most of you guys work during the day. So you'll see I have office hours by appointment. You'll find here a little bit later on, I give you a link to my schedule. And if you need to set up an appointment with me, either a face-to-face appointment or a Zoom appointment, all you have to do is go to my link and it'll give you access to my calendar. Grab a half-hour time slot where I have one available. It's yours. I'm not going to accept it or reject it. It's an automatic acceptance on my part. If you grabbed it, if it was there, it's yours. Unless I then reach out to you and say, hey, sorry about this. I've got to make a change, which every once in a while I do, but not very often. Okay. There's no text for this class. All the materials are going to be in Canvas. They're all posted for us. You got access to everything. The only thing that even approaches kind of like a text is we are going to use this little tool ad nauseum. If you're not familiar with this, if you don't have one, then you're going to become familiar with it. If you don't have one, if you've got like you do a what is it? Not HP. What is it? PI. It does the exact same thing. It just uses different keystrokes. And if you want to use that, that's fine. I just can't support you on the keystrokes of that because I don't have those memorized. This I have memorized. Okay. And we'll be using this a lot. And I'll bring up a digital version of it, which version I've also linked in Canvas for you so that you can have it on your computer if you'd like. And if you've got, well, it's a digital version that works for a PC, not a Windows-based, or excuse me, not an Apple product, not a Mac. There are versions of it for Mac out there. My experience has been that when I posted those links to a Mac version, as soon as iOS updates something, that one's no longer any good. So you can go out and find them. There are plenty of them for free. There are plenty of them you can pay $5 for, and you own it for the rest of your life. Okay. So, but I'll be using it physically, and I'll use the one on the screen. This class is going to come off in many respects like it's a valuation modeling class. Like we're talking about how do you assign a value to a privately held company. And in fact, we will be using almost all of those different metrics. However, you're going to find it's not a valuation modeling class. It's an executive financial decision-making class. The connection is the models and metrics used for asset valuation modeling and those used for decision modeling, financial decision modeling, are the exact same metrics applied to simply different complexities of scenarios. They're the exact same models and metrics. I'll try to remind you of that sometimes, but it will come off so often like, hey, Haskell's just teaching a valuation class, because valuation is my jam. That's where I spend my discretionary time. But that's not what we're doing. We're simply using it as a lens. And you'll find, by the way, that it's the same lens that many, many financial professionals use. In fact, there are many people in each of your companies that are doing this very kind of thing. Okay. You got the course objectives, you've got learning approaches, you got the evaluation. So 10% of your grade is going to have to do with your participation in the class. Participation extends beyond you showing up. Oh, it certainly includes that. And the more timely you are in showing up, the better of that part of the participation score you get, right? But it extends to your use of WhatsApp and being responsive. It extends to you asking questions in this class. It extends to you having conversation. It extends to you answering questions. Here is a fair answer to a question I might ask. I don't know. If I ask you a question, and I will ask it sometimes point blank, I'll say, Rod. And Rod, it's fine to say it. Hey, I'm sorry, I don't know that. Because the reality is, sometimes we don't know everything. And if that's the case, or if Rod has hesitated before answering and somebody else knows, feel free to pipe in with the answer. And I typically only will call on people when I've seen the pattern arise that if I don't call on people, nobody's answering. Okay, so I'm going to use that not to pick on anybody except for Tomas. I'm going to pick on Tomas. You want to know why I'm picking on Tomas? He's not going to Spain with me. I arranged an entire trip to Spain for a guy named Tomas, because Tomas sounds like it's a name from Spain, right? Couldn't be Tomas. No, it had to be Tomas. He's not going with me. I'm messing with him and he knows that. No, he's not going to Spain. Are you going to Spain? Yeah. You going to Spain? Yeah. You going to Spain?
Are you going to China?
Jeremiah, you going to Spain?
Are you going to China next year?
I'm not, but somebody might be. Yeah. Yeah, I've done our MBA trips for 7 or 8 years now. And I love doing them. I really do. They've been a lot of fun. My wife and I travel a lot internationally, otherwise as well. And it's time to let somebody else do these. I need to be out of these. They take a lot of time. Okay, so 30% of your score is going to come right from your Excel assignments, 30% from these problem sets, and 30% from a course exam that we're going to have at the end of the course. Okay, it's a quantitative exam. One. Yep. And there are no real quizzes. I say that, but I'm going to show you a tiny little quiz tonight, but it's a non-quiz quiz, if you will. But that's the score breakdown. It's not coincidental that I've weighted the Excel assignments, the problems in the exam, the same. You're going to find that the Excel assignments, of which you'll have one virtually every week, creates the model construct that you will use to solve the problem set. So if you use week 1's or week 2's Excel, or you're opening up the problem set for that week, then you should have already done the Excel assignment. And if you did that properly and it's rock solid, then you can use it to solve the week 2 problem set with very little deviation. There will be some little deviations. You've got to understand the models well enough to own them, to be able to modify them in minimal ways. But you're going to be building them from scratch. I show you how they're supposed to be built. I show you the numbers that are come out of them. You've seen the narrative and the story behind them. It should be, from everything we've talked about and what you come into this class knowing, it should be at least modestly commonsensical, but these work together. Okay. Oh, there's a whole bit about the participation and the assignments and all this kind of stuff. The exam here, talk about it. Then there's the expectations. You guys can read all this stuff. There's the stuff about me, the stuff about the university, your rules, the laws, all this kind of yah-yah stuff. And then we get to the end of this deal, which is the course schedule. And this is where rubber meets the road. And you'll find in this that I have a detailed outline each week. We're going to talk about these things. And this list is longer than it is for some of the other weeks, I promise. These are largely review items for you. None of this is new information. Okay? Or at least it shouldn't be new information. And then I give you the assignments that result from that week, including when they're due. The tiny little assignments like get into WhatsApp are due fairly rapidly. Okay. In fact, all but one of you, I think maybe 2, are already in the WhatsApp group, and you've got a link to get in there. Get in there. It takes you maybe 20 seconds to do this. The study group assignment, you choose a study group to be in. The course intro quiz, I let you take a couple of days from now because there's a couple of videos that I give you a choice of, and you're going to watch one of them. These videos are from a guy by the name of Aswath Damodaran. Do any of you know that name? He happens to be the modern guru. He's the guru of modern asset valuation modeling. Okay. He's at NYU Stearns. The guy, if he's on his tiptoes about this tall, okay, and if he weighs 105 pounds, I'd be just shocked. He's just a tiny bit of a guy with a brain and a generosity of heart about this big. Okay. He's absolutely brilliant and he's equally approachable. I had the opportunity to be at a conference one time in Manhattan, and he was actually in the audience. And I was getting heckled by a couple of people, and he knew I was getting heckled, and they were disagreeing with me. And this little guy in the back room, I didn't even know he was there, stands up, starts to walk forward just enough so that people could recognize that the great Aswath Damodaran was in the house and he was walking towards the front. And I see him and I think, okay, I'm in deep, deep trouble now. He's going to come up and tell me I'm wrong and they're right, to shut up. And he turned around and told everybody that they might want to pay attention to me, that maybe I was the only guy in the room that knew what he was talking about. I didn't cry outwardly, but I guarantee you I melted inwardly, right? And I had breakfast with him a couple of years later, and just an extraordinarily generous guy. He's got some websites I've given you links to with all kinds of free information and free publications. Do not be a stranger to that website, not just for this class. There's some wonderful stuff there, especially in some of the work that some of you are doing, okay? So every week, I give you what the assignments are, and I give you their due dates. The green assignments are the Excel assignments. And I should have put this with the Excel assignment before this thing before it that's called an ICP. So I should have shown you the Excel assignment and then the ICP, because the ICP is the problem set. ICP stands for in-class problem, which is a bit of a misnomer. We're almost never going to work on these in class. I call it an ICP because that's what I started calling these when I first began to develop them for undergraduate courses. And in the undergraduate course, it takes the entire semester. Then sometimes we do start them in class, and I kind of hold hands in these things. But you guys aren't undergrads, you're graduate students. We're not doing that, okay? So the problem set is always going to be in purple with any other assignments. And then the Excel assignment is going to be in green. Now, if you printed a copy of this out in black and white, then help you an awful lot. But that's what these mean. Any questions yet? Yeah.
Which assignment we're gonna work with the groups and which assignment we're gonna work ourselves?
Great question. You are welcome to work on any and all assignments with your study group or with other people in the class. However, you will each turn in your own work. So you don't turn in a group assignment or a group project. If it happens to be Saif, Tomas, and Dimitri, then you guys are welcome to conspire, collaborate, collude, help each other out. I not only welcome it, I applaud it, and you're absolutely 5-star out of your mind if you don't do it, okay? You will take twice as long to get these things done if you don't work with each other. But I expect a unique submission from Saif and Tomas and from Dimitri, knowing full well that you probably are using some of each other's work. I'll show you something in a few minutes and you'll understand why I'm so liberal about that, okay? The one time that we're going to deviate from that is the final exam. Do not collude or collaborate. Do not, okay? I say that, it's going to be up to you and your honor because you're not going to do it in class during a schedule. It's going to be done on your schedule online. I open a window of time that I think is 2 or 3 days long, and you have an exam that you'll open up. When you open up the exam, you've got 2 hours. Well, maybe it's 3. It's 3 hours to complete it. It's up to you when you do it. I'm trusting you and your integrity. Okay, you're the ones that benefit or not. You're the ones paying to be here. You're the ones getting the grade. You're the ones that are going to have to take this and do something with it afterwards. I will admit to you right now, you can skate through this class and not learn very much, and you might be able to pull the wool over my eyes. And then you will suffer the rest of your career for having done. Not because of me, but because of what you chose not to learn. This is all about you. You guys are master students. Okay? By the way, since we're talking about something quasi-related, let's talk about ChatGPT for a minute, or Gemini, or some of the other iterative models and such that are out there. Are they okay to use in our class? Yeah. What do you think? Yes? Have you met me?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Okay,
in
I-
the class, no, but you can use them to ask any question for them.
Okay, here's one of our rules. I only challenge you or harass you with when you're right. I will never challenge you if you're not right, because I don't want to risk embarrassing you, okay? So when he said that and I threw it back to him, like, what are you talking about? It's because he was right. You absolutely are welcome. The best use of technology and technological innovation is the connection of that, the augmentation of human capital and the technological capital, okay? Now, the assignments in our class, you're gonna have a hard time getting one of these models to do the work for you, okay? I mean, really hard, but in helping you understand things, writing things up, etc., knock yourselves out. I will be able to tell on those kinds of assignment if it came all from ChatGPT or if it was ChatGPT augmented by you or vice versa. You're crazy not to use time efficiencies and productivities, right? You're business people. And if you're not that today, you're very rapidly going to be such. Fair enough? Okay. So every week is laid out the exact same way. And I give as much detail as I can. Fair enough? Any questions about what we've got in the way of the syllabus? Okay, let's look at Canvas. Yeah, in fact, I have it linked here for you in a couple of different places. Yep. Oswath Damodaran. Oswath Damodaran. Excuse me. Okay, so I've organized this largely by weeks, but I've given you some preliminary items here. You've got the syllabus linked right here. You've got the first assignment, which is due tonight, by the way, which is the WhatsApp assignment. And the WhatsApp assignment is terribly difficult. It will take you all of a nanosecond to complete. Some of you have pretty much done it already. And I say effectively, click on this link and become part of the WhatsApp group. I think that Chris and maybe Rod, I think maybe you're the only two that I hadn't already put in there. And you're in, and Rod, had I already put you in there?
I accepted it.
You're in?
Today, I hope it.
Okay, so no, okay, so I already had you in my contact base, so I put you in. So the only other thing you need to do, other than be in that group, is to post your name. Because otherwise, Tomas looks at it and he sees a number, he doesn't know who it belongs to. Okay, so post your name. That's all you got to do. That assignment's done. That's an example of an assignment that I expect to be done well by tonight, right? The study group assignment is you go in and it tells you go to the people section of Canvas. So I'm going to do that. And my interface looks a little bit different than yours, by the way, but essentially you're going to accomplish the same thing. You're going to click on the MBA 640 study groups, and then it's going to let you sign into or place your name in one of those groups. That's the assignment. Okay. You might want to collude on that. You might want to make sure that Jeremiah and Tomas and Dimitri know that you all three want to be in the same group, or figure it out. Okay. If we need a fourth group, tell me that. I doubt that we will. More often than not, a class of one of these classes in our MBA program will end up having one or two study groups. So I'm fine with it. And by the way, when you're having your study groups, if you're actually using them and meeting, and if you want me to attend one of those or come in and help you work on something or explain something to you, let me know when it's going to be, find out if I'm available. And if I don't have something conflicting, I will come. Okay. Sometimes I may only be able to come by Zoom. If you're doing it at 10 o'clock at night on Thursday night, I'm already home, but I'll come in by Zoom if I know and if I'm available. If you invite me, but you got to invite me. Otherwise, I'm not going to show up. You got a couple of Zoom scheduling links here. One of them is the scheduling link to schedule a meeting with me. You can schedule a face-to-face with me up in my office. You can schedule a Zoom with me. It opens up my calendar. You see when I'm available. I love these Calendly links. That's what this is, by the way, because it avoids the issue of Dimitri reaching out to me my email, say, Rick, I need some help with something. Can you meet with me? And then me sending back an email and say, you bet, Dimitri, when do you want to do this? He comes back to me, and then I go back to him. I come back to me, and we play ping pong, right? In this case, all he has to do is click on a link. These links are in Canvas. They're at the bottom of all of my emails. If you want some time with me, then just click on the link. It shows you my schedule. You see where I'm available. Take one. They're in 30-minute increments. Okay. You'll see you've also got a scheduled Teams meeting with Delara. So it's a Zoom meeting with me Teams meeting with Delara. And Delara is my administrative assistant. Many of you know her. Some of you know her very well. She's also the TA for this class. She took this class a year or so ago, got an A in it. And so Delara will be doing a lot of our scoring. She won't be in class with us very much. I might ask her to attend once or twice towards the end of the block when I'm having some schedule challenges myself. Delara likes Teams. I like Zoom. Okay. But our Calendly links work the same way. You open up hers, you see when she's available, you can select a block, it's yours. I give you a link here to some prior class recordings. I'm largely not going to be recording this course, doing a favor for my friend Catherine tonight. And you'll see that I recorded each of the class sessions for this class in spring of 23, so 2 years ago. The cadence of the classes might be slightly different. The order in which we're covering material might be slightly different, but the material that we're covering is the same material. These are not edited. They're in no danger of winning any kind of award at all. But if you need to review something, or if you miss a class and you want to see what's going on there, you've got these that you can watch to do that. They won't give you everything. They give you a lot. They will help you out a lot if you need them. If you don't need them, you do not have to view them. There's nothing required about these. Okay? It's not an assignment. I give you a couple of links here to some resume guides and templates. Some of you are deeply into your careers. Some of you are just at the early stages of your career. Some of you are going to be looking for different jobs when you complete your master's programs, right? You're going to try to upscale. So I give you a resume guide and a template for the preparation of your resume that if you're sending a resume to a business in finance, investment, or accounting, or some close connected element of those three, use this resume construct. Let me open one of these up. This format, and obviously this is just a template, of course. I don't know anybody that major XXXXX, right? But this format is the format you want to use on a resume if you're applying for something in the hardcore business, investment, finance, or accounting field. The reason is, if you don't use this and you send some other formatted resume to somebody, they don't know where to find the information you're looking at. And if that's the case, you've introduced friction into the transaction, your resume won't even be viewed. Okay, you want to have as frictionless a transaction as you possibly can. So this is just a format, it's a template. You're welcome to use it. If you decide you don't want to use it, that's up to you. I don't believe I've given you an assignment with respect to it. I put it there because so many people have asked me for it and it looked like it was something helpful to you. Okay? When we come to each week in the course, you're going to find a pattern. That pattern is going to be, I will give you links to items that are not in Canvas. These are largely Google documents, and these are resources for you. These aren't assignments. These are resources. I will be talking about these things on the different evenings. Some of them I'm going through a lot of little detail, and you're thinking, man, I can't write that fast. I can't keep up with you. Probably not the truth, by the way. And when it does seem like that, one of the things that you can rest assured is I am very repetitive. So I might say something, I might give you the equational definition of free cash flow. No plat plus depreciation minus change in net working capital minus net capital spending. I want you to memorize it. I want you to read it off the top of your tongue. None of you can do that immediately off of that little second and a half I just gave you, right? I will repeat that dozens of times between tonight and next week. And then you've got documents on here that give you that and many other things. Let me show you one or two of these. I won't open all of them up. The comparative metrics guide. This is a guide that was put together by myself and a number of students, 80 some pages. It's a reference. It's not something you want to go out and read. It's got all kinds of great stuff in here. And when you get down far enough, and we're not there yet, that's how much it's got in it. When you get down to this point, give you some sample companies with sample financials. You'll see how those are used in a minute. And then every single page of this guide is a different comparative metric or ratio. This one is the cash build ratio. It gives you a description of it. It gives you how it's used, gives you the equation, it gives you how to interpret it. It gives you some sample scenarios and outcomes. And if you harken back to those financials that I breezed right past, these are the 5 companies in those hypothetical examples. And these are the outcomes using this equation interpreted like this from these companies. You got a page on every one of these things. Again, you don't want to read this. It'll bore you to tears, but it's a great reference and resource. I spent about a year putting this together with a bunch of other students. Okay, and they did a great job. I'm super proud of them. Here's another one, financial statements quick sheet. A couple of you have already seen this in another class you took. A quick sheet is simply my terminology for like a cheat sheet or a crib sheet that gives you an abbreviated representation of a concept. Now you're going to think, Rick, abbreviated? Well, this is a balance sheet. If you go through and read this, you understand everything going on a balance sheet. If you go to the next page, it's the income statement. And below that is the cash flow statement. I'll just open one more because it might be relevant. And it is the corporate finance quick sheet. Dimitri's starting to shudder now. He remembers this. And here in this version of a quick sheet, I give you some finance terms. By the way, all of these are in that guide as well. Guide just gives you a lot more detail, but you got to wade through a lot more pages to get it. And here I give you in alpha order some different acronyms. I give you what the acronym is, so CAPM. I tell you that's the capital asset pricing model. I give you the equation, and then I tell you what each of the inputs are constructed of. So it's a crib sheet, okay? These, by the way, are some of the 1,000 little details. I will tell you, these things are gold. And that's not coming from me, just that's coming from students. You will find, and I think I give you a link to this, maybe not. No, I haven't given it to you here. I have a website that all of these can be found on, but I'm giving you all of them here. So that's what these are, okay? And then you've got, oh, by the way, here's the Demoteran YouTube channel where he's got some great stuff. It is sure to put you to sleep, but it's great stuff. Here is a video from a presentation he did at the American Museum of Finance. I put this one in here not only because it's got some good information, but who knew there was a Museum of Finance? Just how boring do you have to be to decide to create a Museum of Finance? I mean, let's get honest about this, right? So Demoteran's all over this. I then give you a Demoteran assignment due on March 30th, by the way. Pardon me? You have to watch a Demoteran video. And in fact, it happens that you can either watch the one I linked for you, or you can watch this one, narrative or numbers and narratives. They give you the same basic talking points in a different forum. And then you've got some questions to answer. They're pretty simple. If you watch the video, you know the answers. It's why I have this due on the 30th. The other assignments, like the Excel and the ICP, you're going to notice that they are due not the 30th and not a week from tonight, but a week from Wednesday night. And you're going to find that the assignments I give you on a given night are due not the next class night, but 2 days after the next class night. And here's why. So Chris has gotten into this assignment. He's done his very best at it. Maybe he's working with somebody on it. Maybe he's not. And there's a couple of things he's stuck on. He doesn't understand how this has come together. But he's done his work. He's done his very best to get into this. And he's given it his best, the college try. Right, Chris? He comes to class the following Monday night. And the very first thing we're going to do at the beginning of each class is we're going to answer questions about, and we're going to review things from the prior class. And I'll ask you guys, who's working on something you need some help with? And we'll pull it up. We'll pull up my model. We'll look at the problem set, and we'll try to figure out what's going on there and help him to solve it. Because if Chris has that problem, somebody else has the exact same problem, or one so closely related to it, it's good use of our time. It's repetition, it's review, it's helpful. That then is not due that night. It's due a couple of nights later. Question? Okay, so I give you the assignment. I give you the opportunity to work on it. I give you the opportunity to ask questions about it, and then it's due. And oh, by the way, and here's a good example of this. I give you both the problem set and the solution set. The problem set is a live document. In this case, I've given it to you as a link in a Google Drive. So it's a Google Doc, but it's downloadable as an MS Word problem or as an MS Word file. When you submit the problem sets, when you submit your homework from the problem sets, I'm expecting you to open up this document for which you have viewing rights, not editing rights. Copy it to a file of your own name, download it, whatever you need to do. And I expect you to insert into this file your solutions. You can screenshot them from some chicken scratch numbers you have on a piece of paper, or you can type them in. I really don't care. I want them put into this document, and you're going to save that document and you're going to submit that document to the assignment. You're sometimes also asked to submit a spreadsheet in support of it. Okay. But you'll submit the document. Please don't simply submit the spreadsheets and make me go looking for your answers wherever they might have to be on the spreadsheet.
So we can we can expect to have, everything on one file, it's gonna be a problem file and answer file. Could be two separate?
One file.
Could be on one.
So Dimitri, you'll open this and it gives you the scenario. I give you a lot of stuff in this, and then I start asking you some questions. And I expect you to open this thing up and I expect you to start typing in the answer. Or if you want to handwrite the answer or calculate the answer and put the answer, because sometimes it's just quantitative, right? Put on a piece of paper, screenshot or take a picture of that and embed it into this document. That's fine. I don't want to have to go looking for your answers in a structured spreadsheet that I'm only hoping you use my structure, because that takes me more than twice as long to score these things, or Delara in this case, if she's scoring them. And I am having to interpret. Don't make me do that, because if I have to interpret, then I may not interpret it the way you interpreted it, and you may not get the score you're after. Okay. But by the way, just to complicate the issue, find this. I also give you the solution. So you know exactly what needs to be typed into this thing. And Jeremiah's looking at that and saying, Rick, what turnip truck did you just fall off of? You give us the problems, you give us the answers, you want us to submit the answers. Well, we can do that. We can do it 10 minutes before they're due. And how are you going to know? And the fact of the matter is, I'm not going to know until your final exam. And then I'll know exactly who did that. And you're the one that it costs, not me. So I try to make these as learning oriented for you as I possibly can. The goal here is not to test you at every point. The goal is to give you experiences that cause you to help reinforce for yourself what we talked about in class, because you're going to start building a model. Okay. And let's look at the beginnings of that model real quick. Oh, here it is. Yes, you do. He's done this before, which you'd say, oh, that means he has the answers. He does, but I've given you the answers as well. Open. There we go. Okay. The first Excel assignment is I give you a scenario and I ask you to put together a balance sheet, income statement, cash flow statement, and some other supplemental information. The only thing even modestly challenging about this particular one is to remember, if it is a number in blue, let me make this larger so you can see it. I'm so sorry. I saw the look on Jeremiah's face and I recognized it immediately as that means I can't see that, Rick. Yeah. So if it's in blue, what does that mean? Saif, what's that mean?
That you put that and you don't have to change it. It's not calculated.
It's not calculated. In the convention of financial modeling, blue is a given value. You can simply type it in. It's not calculated. It's not estimated. It is given. It's assumed you have been given that number somewhere. Type it in. Okay. If it is black, what does that mean? It means it's a calculation. So here you'll see that, shockingly, the total of current assets is a summation. Okay, now I'm being a little bit facetious here, but a lot of this is simply that challenging or not challenging, right? But I know that if you have to do these things, if you have to take a visual image of this and recreate it and put in the cells, the equations, the functions, the summations, whatever it happens to be, then you begin to understand the construction of the model and where everything came from and how they go together. So the very first of your assignments is literally this. So in this case, all these numbers are blue. And we're going to talk about these between tonight and next week. All these numbers are black. Down here, all these numbers are black. Gross profit, EBIT, EBITDA, all these different things. You might say, oh, where do we find these? The comparative metrics or corporate finance quick sheet has every one of these relationships. And by the way, most of these relationships, almost all of these relationships, were discussed in MBA 603 and the preparatory classes to this. Chris, you didn't take 603, did you? You've taken similar courses at other institutions, is that right? Okay, all right. So you should know all of these things. And if you don't, the quick sheets, the crib sheets should be the key. And if not, each other in your study group are the key. And if not, Delara or our tutors are the keys. Okay. So this first one, we are simply recreating this. And I am such a jerk about this. I make this so hard for you that, let me go into the assignment again. I even give you, where is it? Well, I don't do it in this one because it's just an income statement and balance sheet. Oftentimes, I actually give you the spreadsheet. Oh, wait, I do it in this one. That's not the same assignment. Excuse me. Let me open this one up. It's the Excel assignment. I also give you a, where's it at? Mirror Dravana, and I give you the file. The file has numbers though, doesn't have the equations. And if you want to open up this file, and it was a link right there in the assignment for you, right? If you want to open up this file rather than typing everything in anew, do it. This is not a class on teaching you to type or whether or not you can code something in blue versus black. This, we're business people. We need to be productive. We need to be efficient. So I give you this. All you need to do is go in, and if it's black, put in the right equational structures, functions, etc., to get that number. And we will have talked about those, and or you'll have had the quick sheets, etc., that you should know how to do. Fair enough? So there are 2 of these due each week. There's an Excel assignment and there's a problem set. Oh, in a week like this one, there's a couple of little supplementary things like WhatsApp and signing into a study group, right? But every week there's an Excel assignment and there is a problem set. And I know the way I'm representing it to you, it seems like, wow, this is easy. It's not, because there's 1,000 little details. And I don't know about you, my mind is so finite and so small, I can't keep that many details. I need people to help me. And in business, in your professions, you are not expected to do everything by yourself. Okay? Any questions about any of this? Okay, so let me go back to class. Well, once we get to the second week, you'll see it's the same model. I give you a bunch of resources, links to them through Google. I give you a couple of assignments. Next week, I give you resources. I give you some assignment. In this third week, I have this series of time value of money, TVM, time value of money videos. These are not in danger of winning any awards. Okay, I created these. I created them actually for a labor economics course that I created at the University of Utah. But they're the same time value of money constructs. And I walk you through in video number 4, I walk you through the time value of money calculations with this calculator. So it's a tutorial for that. You do not need to watch these videos. They are not an assignment that you need to fulfill. They are there as a resource for you. There's only about 100 million YouTube videos out there that will teach you how to use a calculator that looks like this and time value of money. Use mine, use somebody else's. I really don't care. Use each other. I'm great with it. You went through the MBA 603 course. I think it had a little section that discussed some of this as well. So it doesn't matter. I just care that you know how to do it. And I'll go through keystrokes with you in class as well, but I care that you know how to do it. Okay? And then finally, and we're just going to rock it down to the exam. And the last week, so in the last week, it's about using from enterprise value to value per share. I'm going to introduce you to a holistic cash flow model, which will be a completely different looking model than the one that we're building. Okay? Because I want to introduce you to a different model form. In fact, we're going to look at several different kinds of models when we're together. I've got only one quick sheet for you here. It's the equity valuation quick sheet. I give you a cash flow assignment, and it says that it's due. I believe that's the night of class, because we actually are going to work on this one together in class. So we're going to start it. And then there's not a lot else that's due. That's the last night of class. And then you have between then and that following Friday night at 11:59 p.m., which is the last minute of the block, to go in, open up the course exam. You'll read just a little bit about it, and then you'll click on open the quiz. So this part of the assignment and exam, this material is available to you right now. And it's just instruction. That's all it is. Okay. And this open the quiz is opening the exam itself. And when you open the exam, which you can't do right now, it won't open up until the appointed day. In fact, I believe I have it open for you on Wednesday and it closed on Friday night. That's my recollection of how I set it up. Might be a little bit off with that. You then have that period of time to open it up. Do so when you got 3 good, clear hours, because it's going to take you more than a minute to do. I don't think it'll take you 3 hours. I give you 3 hours so that you can do it well. And then you'll submit it. Okay. The exam gives you a scenario in which you have to make some assumptions, which means I don't give you all the information. You've got to make some assumptions. And they're not unusual assumptions. They're not outlandish assumptions. You should have the context and the perspective to be able to make them, and you will state the assumptions. And then you have to go through the steps to recommend either doing this thing that's in the scenario or not, based upon the decision criteria and the models, the metrics, the constructs that we have constructed in the prior 7 weeks of the class together. Okay. So you actually have to do what we've been talking about for the prior 7 weeks on a scenario that's not valuing a company, is deciding how we determine whether or not we should do this thing. Okay. I want to show you one more thing with respect to the Mira Dravana. And I have to open up a different spreadsheet to do it. Okay. Notice that in this spreadsheet, you can't see it, I have numerous worksheets: financial statement, val, op invest with vals only, etc. You are going to, in your very first Excel assignment, create the first of these worksheets, and it's the one I call fin statement. You can call it whatever you want. I don't care what you call it. And and you will submit that in fulfillment of that first week's Excel assignment. You will submit your solution to this. The second week, you will submit the exact same file, only this time it will now have your original fin statement. Maybe you'll have adjusted it from some feedback you got when Delara and I look at the assignment, and then you'll go ahead and do the second worksheet, which not coincidentally links to the first. Because notice here, and you can probably just barely see it. Let me make it bigger for you. Notice on this whole sheet, you've got 2 blue values. Everything else is calculated from something else. Well, I promise they aren't only calculated from these blue values. They're calculated by referencing back to the work you did in the first worksheet of the model. The third week, which is this val without adjustments, if I remember correctly, you got a whole bunch of stuff here, most of it black. You've got 4 blue numbers. That's it. From those 4 blue numbers and everything else you've done in the financial statement and in the Val IRR NPV, you, if you've been paying attention, you can construct all of this with those inputs. We are building a model, something that works off of itself, and it creates something that later on, once the model is completed, you should be able to take that model. And if somebody says, Rod, I'd like to think about whether or not it makes sense to acquire this operation and put it inside of our company, you should say, well, what's it going to cost us? What are some of the initial inputs? And you ought to be able to use this model to determine whether that's a viable option for your company. Or we want to invest in a $500,000 marketing campaign. Or I want to hire a group of bond traders from Goldman Sachs, pay them a $10 million bonus, and rely on the revenue stream they give us. We ought to be able to decide, is that worth doing? It either is or it isn't, period. Now, whether it's worth doing or not doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to do what the model tells you should do. That's where human beings and interpretation comes into play. But the numbers, the outcomes in terms of the quantitative is pretty cut and dry. You then just have that tool, that resource to make some decisions. So we're going to be constructing this every week for the Excel assignment. You will turn in the exact same file. Only every week there's going to be another tab added to it. You're going to do a little bit more and a little bit more. Okay. Every week when you do your problem set, if I were you, I would do the Excel assignment first. I would then save that. I would then copy it to a new file name. I would then open it up and put in it the inputs that are given to you in that week's problem set. You're going to have to make some small modifications. That's going to help evidence that you actually understand what you created. You understand the relationships. In fact, there's nothing better than having to adjust it to help you understand it, right? And then if you've done that, then you'll realize, oh, that's where these outcomes come from. Here's how I use it. That's the class. Any question? Okay, let me look. I think we're ready to take a break. Just stay with me just a minute here. Let me make sure I'm telling you the truth. Yes, I am. Okay, so it's 4 minutes after. Can we be back in here by a quarter after, ready to go? And if you're back sitting in your seats before a quarter after, ready to go, that's when we'll start. Fair enough? Okay, let's take a break.
Excel, was that kind of like the final product, or is that something that's?
So no, it's not in there. It is the final product. I don't give it to you because, well, frankly, I want you to construct it. And mine has more more worksheets in it than yours will. Chris, come talk to me for a minute.
Can I bother you?
Yeah, sure.
About, so that people tab,
Oh, it doesn't give you an option.
it does not.
Okay.
And then also the videos,
Uh-huh.
they're not pulling up either on this or on OneDrive. Neither one.
Let's go down and open one of them up
It was prior class. Things. Yes,
and then click on that, see what
Yeah.
happens.
neither of these would work.
Oh, interesting. Okay, we'll have somebody else try that as well, just to make sure it's not just
Okay.
you.
I think
But
it
we'll
might
fix
just be
it.
me, but
Now, maybe we'll see. We'll have a couple
this
of you.
computer.
Well, you may be fine. It may be an issue of links. So, you and I are just meeting from Mongolia. You did your undergraduate work somewhere else?
Yep.
Where'd you go?
Mongolia, University of Financial Engineering.
And when did you come here?
7, 8 years ago.
Okay, so you've been here for a while. You've been working?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the financial classes that you've taken that would be preparatory to being in this, tell me about them and not only what they were kind of conceptually and when you took them.
So last time this one, like the sheets, I took the classes on accounting classes, like accounting class 1, 2, 3, like
Okay.
all the CPA stuff.
So you're an accountant by education?
No, I was in finance major, but
Okay.
they have to be acquired.
Yeah. Yeah, so I took almost as many accounting classes in my undergraduate degree as the accounting majors. Because if you're in finance, you gotta understand accounting. That's all there is to it. You're good for time value of money?
Yeah.
Good for all the ratios?
all the ratios.
You're good with
I just-
Excel?
Yeah, I just been trying to remember all the equations, that's all.
Well, I give you those quick sheets to help you with that. So if you get stuck, need some help, there's lots of people around there that are gonna help you. Have you met Delara, my assistant?
My,
You will. She works for me as my admin assist, but she also TAs this class, so you'll get to know her. She helps tutor a little bit. So if you need help, make sure I know.
Okay.
Don't get stuck. Don't get frustrated. Don't get lost. Reach out for help.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
All right. Very good. Thanks.
Yeah.
Tomas, I'm only messing with you about the Spain thing. I understand the gig, and I don't have a problem.
no, it's okay, I'm kind of bummed about it, but.
Sometimes the way it goes, right? So like this trip to Spain, we will spend several weeks of the block in a class that's preparatory to the trip where we'll go through logistics, we'll look at some of the different cultural elements that we're likely to experience in various types of business there that are different than business here. We'll study the country, we'll study the economy, we'll study the government, study the contract. Then when we're there, we'll have, well, Spain is a good example. We show up in Spain on a Tuesday, and Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, all business day, we have business. 2 or 3 businesses each day, plus in one case, there's an organized dinner one night, it's like for some business people. And then on Saturday of that week, we have some fun in the morning, we'll go do something cultural recreational. And then later that day, we get on the airplane, we go to another city, we'll go from Barcelona to Bilbao, the other side of the country. So it's about a 2-hour flight. And then we're all day Sunday in Bilbao. We'll go to Guggenheim there, we're actually meet with some of the management of Guggenheim for them to help us understand the running of that as a business. Which is a fascinating capital intensive business with very little truth. So buying all the artwork. And very little of it's on loan, most of it they have to buy. And get very little financial return from that other than the size of the asset.
Yeah. It's
Not from the user fees, right? But in terms of cash flow
I
returns,
see.
very low, and that's why it's a nonprofit. So some of us that afternoon are going to a athletic club at Barcelona soccer match. Some of you got dinner that night, and then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 2 or 3 businesses a day. And then we get on there and the morning come up.
This is a lot more than I thought it would be. A lot of the times that I went on vacation with my school was not as intense, and it was far less experiences that actually related to what we were going for.
So, and I know that there are a lot of those, right? And that's what some of the students think they're gonna get into. It's part of why we give a class in advance. So these particular students, they know very well. Tomas has been hearing about this stuff, and he knows, okay, this is what they're going to be experiencing. My take on this is, I'll explain the grundle. And frankly, you guys paid the money, because it's coming out of your tuition. Well, the bit of the grundle money, we're taking you for a week or 10 days or something like that, to another part of the world, away from your job, away from your family. I want you to have some fun, but I want it to be worth it. And it's more about creating an international network for you. It's the beginning of many of the students' international business networks. It's about understanding, look, you know, the way we do things here in the United States, as successful as that is for us here, does not fly. Very different. In fact, I'm going to guess that you may have had some exposure in different parts of the Middle East. I have. If I went to the Middle East and said, here's my product and service, here's my price, here's the wonders of it, you want to buy it? I'm done. I'm never going to get any place further. But here, if I'm in New York, if I don't do it that way, I'm never going to get any place. Right? So the culture of business is different everywhere, even though the debit is still on the left and the credit is still on the right.
So what's wrong with saying that?
Oh, I think it's a scheduling issue. I think, is that right?
I'm gonna say
Something
Spain
like that.
sounds like a dream come true to go experience business.
Why? It's a mix.
I'm
of
sorry.
things. No, that's fine.
I
I
hope
actually,
you guys come across.
no, I've been to Barcelona twice. I actually studied abroad there.
Okay.
I've done a bunch of business visits. And it also just kind of lines up with like moving out of my apartment right now. And I got engaged this last summer. Actually on my trip to Barcelona and London.
Wow.
And we're moving into a house right at that time. So instead of being there to do all the moving.
That makes sense.
And I just started a new job. And, I was like,
Perfect storm.
things happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got frustrated like the first time down? Yeah. There's like, what part of the mountain did you get? I got stuck, you know, I had to break on the, I was speed zero.
So Rod, do you know Brian Weirman?
I don't, Brian.
Brian Weirman. He's one of our management faculty. He teaches in the MBA program. And Brian has only been with us a couple of years. Although he's got some extraordinary experiences and he's one of the smarter guys I know. So I took Brian on one of these trips to Thailand and Vietnam 2 years ago. That was the first of the trips he will have been on as a faculty member. And then he's going on this one with me, and I'm kind of turning things over to him for my part of these trips. I tend to do one of these a year. Next year, I'm not sure. I know that the China and maybe Korea are on the docket for next year. It just depends on whether or not there's the right number of students in that cohort at that time. So we'll do it then or another time. Yeah. And that'll be Michael Mamo and Brian Jorgensen. And yeah, and you have the opportunity, having deferred on this one, to go on another as long as it's not more than a year after you graduate. Okay. Okay. Yeah, Chris. Pardon me? Are you say you don't get it, you don't understand, or you're not allowed to do it?
I don't understand what happened.
Got it. So you're enrolled in our MBA program, right? And you or somebody else is paying tuition for you to be in this program, right? So as part of your program, in about the middle or just after the middle of your program, you will be invited to, well, you'll be expected to take a class. It's called the International Context course. where we'll talk about a particular country we're taking students to. And we'll prepare them to go. Some of these guys have been in this class recently. In fact, it just wrapped up, didn't it? It just wrapped up a week or so ago. And then after that class wraps up, we take you to that country. The majority of the expense, the airfare, hotel, maybe half your meals, excursions, etc., that are part of the experience that we've organized is all paid for by the program, and it comes out of your tuition dollar.
So the first semester I didn't know.
Yeah.
The travel expense.
So if you don't want to go, you're welcome to give it to me. I'm happy to take it for you. He thinks I'm serious. Chris, I'm not serious. Okay. So we've got a lot. In fact, I just realized I grabbed the wrong element here. Let me bring it up here instead. I'll work off of this. Okay, so we're gonna look at a number of things, and these are the items that are at the top of your syllabus for tonight. So each night we'll pretty much cover the items that I've listed in here in the order in which I'm listed. At least that's my goal. And if it makes sense for us to do them differently, or if you have an interest that we're pursuing that's a little bit different, that's fine. But I will largely be pursuing what we've got here. So we spent the first hour plus just doing an introduction to the course. It takes the longest amount. So let's talk about how firms value assets. And I could state this differently, how firms make financial decisions. Okay. So Jeremiah, you are thinking about investing $500,000 in a new production line in your business. How do you decide whether or not that's a good idea? It's a good thing to do.
How do I decide?
Yep.
I defer to Tomas.
If you've gone to your VP of finance, who in this case turned to his financial analyst, he just raised his hand, by the way. So he thinks he knows. He's giving you a lifeline, brother. You might want to take it. And as it turns out, I know that he knows because he's done this stuff with me before. Saif, how do we make this decision?
Yes, there's a couple options to take when we make a decision about that. I can look first at the ROI about this investment.
What ROI?
Return on investment.
How do you figure out what that is?
This is how much I get, what's the, how much the return I get from investment.
How do you
this
determine
amount of
that?
money. I get the exact calculation.
How do you know where the numbers come from? He's exactly right, by the way. Remember, I never challenge you unless you're right. Okay, I just won't do that. But what comes before being able to make that ROI calculation is we have to forecast the revenues. We have to forecast the cost of goods sold if they're there. Some don't have cost of goods sold, some are service businesses with little or no COGS, right? We have to think about the operating expenses. We have to think about the non-operating cash flow elements. So we extend accounts receivable, we buy inventory, we pay off debt, we borrow money, we get money from investors, we buy equipment. Those are non-operating but cash flow elements, right? So we have to identify the expected future cash flows. And if Jeremiah says, okay, we've done our work, we figured out the revenues that will come from the product that we will sell from this production line. We figured out the cost of goods sold from the production line. We figured out the operating expenses of running the production line. We figure out the other elements, the non-operating expense of cash flow items. And that's going to result in the expected future cash flows for maybe the next 2, 3, 5, whatever years it might happen to be. Now, Saif wants to now use those items to figure out a return on investment.
Right, and I can just basically check if I cover my liabilities. If my liabilities, when I subtract my liabilities from assets, and I get positive number, then I will take this chance.
Okay. And I'm going to say we have to be a little bit more circumspect than that. We want to rigorously identify the expected future cash flows, which aren't going to come to us today, are they? Some are gonna come to us within the next year, some the year after that, some the year after that. So one of those cash flows is $3 million, let's say. No, it's silly. Let's say it's $200,000. Comes to us in 4 years. Is that worth $200,000 to us today? No, we know it's not. So there's a calculation we can run. It's called a discounted cash flow calculation. And we can sum those expected future cash flows that have been discounted for rate and time, and we can come up with a present value. If we subtract from that present value the cost of investment, in this case, $500,000, it's going to either result in a positive number or a negative number. If it's a positive number, that positive number already includes the cost of capital, the discount rate that we had to consider. If it comes up with a negative number, it also includes that. If it's a negative number, don't do it. If it's a positive number, your path is clear to do it. Present value, net present value is a decision criteria. Internal rate of return is a decision criteria. There's something called profit index. It's a decision criteria. As it turns out, net present value, and net present value is simply the present value of the expected future cash flows discounted for rate and time, net of the investment that we had to come up with today to do this thing, the 500 grand. If it's a positive net present value, we're good to go. Negative net present value, we're not good to go. If the internal rate of return, which we'll talk about calculating later on, I'm just giving a broad brushstroke, right? The internal rate of return better be greater than the discount rate. If it's not, then the net present value is going to be negative. And the profit index is going to be less than 1. Those three elements, net present value, internal rate of return, and profit index, all three of them are standalone decision criteria, but they are also interconnected. One of them tells you a great deal about the other. It doesn't matter which one of them you choose to use, but it tells you enough about the other two to be able to use them as a set of decision criteria. So one of the ways that we make this determination is we come up with expected future cash flows, which there's a lot to that. We got to forecast all this, which means we're doing as highly educated guesswork as we possibly can. The future is all about guesswork. We know in the future whether we were right. We don't know until then whether we're right. And because we don't know, we're going to apply some discounting factor to it because of the risk that we're taking of being wrong. That's the discount rate. That's the discount factor. And we'll talk about how those rates will come up, how you calculate them, what different types are, what they mean, what's relevant about them, from whose perspective they come. So that's one of the ways. So we can run a DCF, a discounted cash flow. Virtually all financial decisions at the firm level can be determined through the use of a discounted cash flow analysis. Yeah, Alex?
When you said positive number, you mean between 0 and -1 and 1?
I mean, anything greater than 0. So think about this, Alex.
But there's no, like, if it's really low but positive, there's not,
There's not. There's not. I want you to think about this. I want to find net present value through the utility of a discounted cash flow. Okay, the net present value is the present value of the expected future cash flows. This number and this number are the same number. Okay. If I then subtract from that the cost of the investment, in this case, it was $500,000, then I have used the present value, having already discounted it for rate and time. I've already accounted for my discount rate, which might be my expected rate of return. If this number is greater than this number, then this is going to be greater than 0. If the present value of the expected future cash flows is less than the cost, it's going to be less than 0. If the number is greater than 0, that means that those expected future cash flows, even when accounting for the discounting of them over time, greater than what it costs, do it. It will be profitable on an absolute profit basis, so accounting profit, and economic profit. We'll talk about economic profit at one. If it's not, then either A, run away, don't do it, or there must be some utility that you will get out of doing it that wasn't captured in the numbers. And that's viable. It might be a real estate transaction. It might be buying a company that you want to own it. In fact, you know that company sitting in and of itself might result in a negative value, but when you take it and put it in your company, it might create some operating efficiencies for your company that you get more out of it than it created on its own. Now there's something that's not expressed in its numbers. So you might be able to argue and interpret your outcomes, but knowing this is critical. Not knowing it, you're simply guessing. And guessing and hoping is not a plan. That's not business. It might be politics. It might be fairy tales. It's not a plan. Okay. So we value assets through a discounted cash flow. That's referred to as the income approach. Now, if the asset that we're dealing with, some of this, if the asset that we're dealing with is an entire company, we might be able to find a valuation multiple, sometimes referred to as an enterprise multiple, by observing transactions in the market for a similar kind of company. Let's say it's dry cleaners. Tomas is looking at buying Rick's Dry Cleaners. Don't do it. Okay, it's gonna lose money for me for years. Not really, it's not a real company. Right? So he wants to buy this, and he wants to figure out from an income approach, how this might make sense and what the number might be. That's great, he's figured it out. But he also wants to think about, well, this is interesting. Rick's Dry Cleaners has a revenue, it has an operating income, it has an EBIT, which is EBIT, by the way, right? Has EBITDA. And there are other dry cleaners in the last year or so have sold in the marketplace. We can look at what they sold for, compare that with their revenue, we can come up with a multiplier. Or we can look at what they sold for, come up with their EBIT or EBITDA or cash flow or whatever it happens to be, SDE maybe, which you may or may not know. And we can come up with a ratio. If we know that ratio for other transactions of similar companies in our marketplace over a reasonable time frame, it's reasonable to assume that if we take Rick's Dry Cleaning revenue, multiply it by the revenue multiple, that should give us a sense based upon a market approach, comparable value theory, what Rick's Dry Cleaners should be worth. And if Rick's Dry Cleaners is worth, let's say, $1 million, and Rick's asking $1.2 million, probably not a good idea. At least not a good idea to pay him $1.2 million, right? If he's asking $1.2 million, I'm asking $1.2 million, and you can go ahead and whittle me down to 900,000. Maybe it's a good idea, because if it's got a value of $1 million from a multiplier approach, and you can buy it for less, then your net present value is going to ultimately be positive, right? Okay, those are the two approaches. We will examine both of those approaches. We will examine them in your spreadsheets. You're going to build the model that helps you go from the financial statements, which are all history, right? Income statements and balance sheets are not about tomorrow. They're about yesterday. But we want to have a foundation of yesterday so we can give some credibility or some platform to calculate tomorrow. Dimitri comes to me and says, look, my business is going to have a 20% increase in revenue this year. Great, Dimitri. I want to see the last 4 years of your financials. If he's never had more than a 2% increase in revenue in his life on a year-over-year basis, how much credibility do I assign to his belief he's going to have 20% this year? Not so much. And if I don't have a lot of credibility there, I'm going to apply a big discount rate to overcome that. I'm going to do that before I'm going to change his expectation, because I don't know as much about his business as he does. I don't know if he's wrong. I just know that there's not a lot of probability from his prior activities that he's right. So there's risk in this, and I overcome risk by applying a discount rate. Okay. So how do we value assets? We apply an income approach. We apply a multiples approach. We can apply the multiples approach if it's an actual business, a whole business unit. We can't apply a multiples approach when we're just thinking about making an investment. I want to make an investment in a tractor for our company. My company does a little bit of site construction, and I've been renting a backhoe every time I've needed it for the company. Now I want to think about buying one. Well, what's the revenue from me buying one? I'm not selling backhoes. The revenue is not really a revenue. It's a saving of expense. I've been renting it, right? So my revenue, if you will, is now the lack of having to rent it. That's the revenue I think about. What are all the costs, the operating costs of running the backhoe? How long will I have the backhoe? What kind of productivity can I have? What are the expected future cash flows coming from the backhoe? I can now compare I can compare the present value of those expected future cash flows to the $75,000 the company wants for the backhoe I want to buy. It's either a good decision or it's a bad decision, plain and simple. Now, the estimation of the expected future cash flows might be somewhat fungible, right? How accurate is that? What do we know? What are we absolutely certain about with respect to forecasted cash flows? Well, one thing do we know about them. They're wrong. They're wrong because they're motivated by guesses, right? They're assumptions. What we don't know for sure is how wrong they are. The better quality of data we have going into these decisions, the lesser the incorrectness of it, right? And the further out in time, the more we go, the more conservative we're going to become. The higher the discount rate we're going to apply to overcome the possible lack of them being accurate. Okay. Okay, the next item I had on my list is going from book value to market value. So I've got a balance sheet, and my balance sheet's got some current assets. Let's say they're equal to 1,000. I've got some fixed assets equal to 10,000. So I've got some total assets of 11,000. And because it's a balance sheet, I've got some current liabilities of 500. I got some long-term debt of, let's say, 2,000. And that means I'm going to have some owner's equity of what? 2,500 off of that is, I think, $8,500. Such that I've got $11,000 on both sides of the balance sheet, my balance sheet balances, right? As simplified as you can possibly get it. Okay. Would we say that the value of this business is embodied by the value of its assets? Could we just say, well, look, you've got $11,000 in assets on the balance sheet. I could either buy or recreate this business for $11,000, right? Why not, Rod?
You have liability.
Well, okay, you're trying to think about the equity value of the business. Separate the value of the business from the equity value. Here's the enterprise value equation. Enterprise value is equal to the equity plus the debt minus the cash. The enterprise value, for all intent and purposes, is the value of the business. But when we're doing this, we have to think about this cash. This equity should be the market value of the equity. So the market value of the equity shares, right? This debt, as it turns out, can very plausibly be, with a little bit of calculating, the market value of the debt. And if you're not yet familiar with the difference between book value of debt and market value of debt, I promise you within the next couple of weeks, you really will be. There will be no question in your mind as to what the difference is and why it's motivated, how it's motivated. So the market value of the equity plus the market value of the debt minus the cash on the balance sheet. Now that's the textbook definition of enterprise value. You're going to see that in my quick sheets. The practical application is we're going to hold, in practical terms, cash at zero. Any idea why?
Like margin of safety, it's if all else things being equal, like if this business generates no money.
There's that part of it, Jeremiah, to be sure. There's another reason as well. I want you to start to think about cash as being the oil, the lubrication in the engine that is the business. Take the lubrication out of the engine seizes up, you're done, right? So in practical terms, this is actually surplus cash. Well, we're gonna be considering privately held businesses or small business transactions. And when I say small business transactions, I mean business transactions that are small, not transactions that are only in a small business. That makes sense? Yeah. Okay, a business transaction will be small. So Dimitri has a $400 million company. That's not small. He's thinking about making a $1 million investment in an ad campaign. That's small. He didn't have a small business. It's a small business transaction. Okay. So I don't know very many small businesses or any businesses, very many privately held businesses that have surplus cash. You go to any business owner and very few of them are going to say, oh, yes, I'm swimming in cash. I've got all kinds of surplus cash. Now, if that business owner happens to be Mark Zuckerberg or somebody that understands how to say Meta or Google or Alphabet, then they have more cash than many sovereign nations. Okay, but most don't. Because most don't, we're going to hold this for functional purposes at zero. In an assignment that doesn't tell you to hold it at zero, then treat it as the number on the balance sheet. So in this case, then, this number, Rod, is the value of the business. We're going to want to know this number because if you're the equity stakeholder, that's the number that's a big deal to you, right? And you're right. If we're going to find out that, we're going to take the enterprise value minus the debt. That'll leave us with the equity, but that's what's going on here. So even with that, I'm going to argue that this business with $11,000 of assets on the balance sheet is not an $11,000 business. Why am I making that argument? How can I make that argument? Well, it has some future value, and this business is going to be using those assets. Let's say that this is a bunch of tractors. Okay, and maybe this balance sheet is stated in millions, so that's $10 billion, tractors. Okay, those tractors are on the balance sheet at what they cost us minus any accumulated depreciation. Does the depreciated value of a tractor on a balance sheet necessarily reflect its market value? No, in fact, it almost certainly doesn't reflect its market value. Depreciation is a non-cash expense. It's kind of an artificial construct, right? We pay attention to it to understand cash flow, and we pay attention to it to understand how much we might have to pay in income taxes. And the depreciation we might apply to it to understand its cash flow may be a completely different number than the depreciation that came off of a schedule from the IRS so we can calculate our taxes. Totally different constructs. Both of them falling under GAAP, of course, but completely different numbers. So we can agree the market value of the tractor, any given tractor, isn't necessarily its book value. Well, how do we assign the market value? Well, if we take that tractor, put it into play in business, start renting it out or start using it to do customer jobs, there's a cash flow that's going to come from it. It's going to have revenue, it's going to have expenses, it's going to have some expected future cash flow. We're going to discount that for rate and time because we've not just had the tractor as an isolated asset, we've used it in business. It's a productive asset. That productive asset, coupled with our human capital productivity, coupled with our client list, our brand, our reputation, creates those revenue. It's not just the tractor. The tractor sitting there on tarmac is what? Rubber, steel, petroleum, etc. But in the hands of Saif, who is a skilled tractor technician driver, I don't even know what they're called. And I'm saying that, operator, thank you. I don't even know the name, right? That's how little I know about this. He can take that and he can do in 5 minutes. Well, that might take me an hour to do. We apply human capital, we apply our reputation, we apply our brand, and that's where we get our revenue from. And all of a sudden, we realize why businesses are not valued at the book value of their assets. We call the difference between the book value of the assets and the value of the business, we call that goodwill. Sometimes it's blue sky. Okay, goodwill. It becomes an asset, but at a different point in time. So that's something to remember. The book value of an asset and the market value of the asset are not the same thing. In this class, we are going to go from book value to market value because we're going to transcend accounting. An awful lot of what we're looking at today and some of the things you'll deal with in your assignments from tonight are going to be very accounting centric. I need to know that you know these things, okay? We're gonna have a platform, a foundation that we all share, and we're gonna go from that very accounting centric platform or foundation, and we're gonna go into the markets. We're gonna go into tomorrow. Accounting is oh so today and yesterday. Finance is oh so tomorrow, okay? Market versus book. Any questions about that? So I want to talk about the firm's capital structure. Now, I just said enterprise value. I'm all about having the right color here. Enterprise value is equal to market value of the equity, which might be common equity plus preferred equity, by the way. So equity is a generalized variable. It might be common and preferred. So it might be E plus P, all right? I'm going to simplify it and say the market value of the equity plus the market value of the debt minus cash. That is the textbook example or definition for enterprise value. And I just simplified it, but what I really did was I explained to you V, not EV. EV has a very definite description. V is simply equity plus debt, which might be common equity plus preferred equity plus debt. Okay, let's assume for a minute that Alex has identified that there's an asset that has a value of 1,000. Maybe that's been identified because a valuation analyst has put together an assessment for him, or maybe that's identified because people are paying $1,000 for that asset. It's a thing, it's a computer, it's a production line, it's probably not a business at $1,000. And if he buys this for $1,000, there is some known amount of debt in this, and let's say it's $200. And he wants to know how much he needs to pay in order to own the equity of this. Well, we can reverse engineer this equation, this value equation, such that we can solve for equity by taking the value minus the debt, or the 1,000 minus 200 to equal an $800 equity. Don't confuse equity value and the value of the business. They're two different things, but they're related things. If I am the lender that loaned this thing, in this case, 200, I have a claim on that company's expected future cash flow, don't I? It's got to make the interest payments to me out of its expected future cash flows. It's got to make the principal payments to me. I want to get paid my 200 back, and I want my return on investment stated as an interest rate, right? So I have a claim on the expected future cash flow. Somebody else comes along and they want to own the equity for this. Does the equity stakeholder have a claim on the company's expected future cash flow? That's exactly what they have. They don't technically have the ownership of the company's assets. They may own the company if they buy out all of its equity, all its equity shares. But what is their claim? Their claim is on its expected future cash flow that has not already been claimed by others. In this case, if it's Tomas that's buying this, he's got to know that I have a claim on $200 of that company's expected future cash flow. It is the balance of the debt that the company has, right? You can pay it off right now, or you can pay it off later. It's going to be paid off, right? He has a claim against his expected future cash flows. They belong to him, those that are not already committed to others like me. Company, net of its principal repayments, which by the way is a cash flow item, net of its interest expense, which is also a cash flow item as part of net income, right? If it has a cash flow in any given period of 100, he can either choose to reinvest that cash flow in the company as accumulated retained earnings, right? Or he can choose to take it out as a dividend or distribution. He owns the right to that cash flow if he owns the equity of the company. Does that make sense? Kind of? A little ethereal? Sure. Okay. Yeah. What we're doing, by the way, of course, is thinking about what you've learned, been exposed to, studied in the past. I might be giving some different terminology to it because I'm giving I'm not giving accounting terms necessarily, although some of these are accounting terms. I'm giving finance terms. I'm bringing us into the market. Here's one of the frustrating things that's going to happen with you in this class. I will use the same term. No, I will use different terms sometimes to represent the exact same item, construct, or phenomena. I don't do it because I don't remember the terms. I don't do it because I'm just trying to be mean. I do it because they're different terms used in the marketplace. For example, I'm going to separate the expected future periods of time into the explicit period and the continuation period. Now, if you went and talked to your friend Nick would say, okay, I know what those mean because I was schooled at the hands of this schmuck Rick Haskell, right? But he would say many people in the market refer to that as the discrete period and the terminal period. That's the more common utility. I learned most of my vernacular here through McKinsey. I didn't work for McKinsey, I studied McKinsey, okay? And McKinsey and Company, largest, most profitable, most highly reputed consulting company in the country. I'm willing to hang my hat on them, okay? But a common utility is often terminal value, terminal period, or discrete period. There's other terms as well. They mean the same thing. So I will use these terms interchangeably. I won't hold you accountable to a term I haven't described to you, explained to you, okay? I'll use them interchangeably, and sometimes that might be a little confusing to you. I'm doing it purposely because you're going to find and use different interchangeably in the marketplace. Okay. I want to look at the cash flow stack. Like we're going to look at cash flow. We're going to look at it, invested capital. We're going to look at market value of debt. We're going to look at a capital asset pricing model. Man, I'm saying that, it sounds like a lot. I promise you're going to live. Okay, just reviews. So I want to look at the cash flow stack, and we do this for in this case because I want to think about free cash flow. At the end of the day, what I'm trying to calculate through this particular example is free cash flow. I start with some revenue. Revenue is the top of my cash flow stack, right? I'm going to subtract out some cost of goods sold, and that leaves me with gross profit. That little pi symbol is econ speak and finance speak for profit. Okay? Doesn't mean 3.14159, it means profit. I subtract from this operating expenses. And it takes me to EBIT. What does EBIT stand for? Earnings before interest and tax, which simply means interest and tax are coming somewhere down on the cash flow stack. That's all it means. I want you to think about this as the initial building block of cash flow. This is veritable magic, by the way, in finance. It's a really important term. And its buddy, EBITDA, is the next building block, if you will, for cash flow. How do I go from EBIT to EBITDA? What does EBITDA stand for? What's the term? Depreciation and amortization. What's the difference? What is depreciation and what is amortization? Not you. And by the way, I'm going to do that sometimes, not because he's wrong, because I want other people to do some of the lifting, Alex. Well, did I use your name out loud? Depreciation, what is it? Not a number. Don't give me a number. What's it mean? What's it stand for? Dimitri, what's depreciation? Okay. Rod? Yeah, it's the numeric representation of a depletion in an asset's value over time. Obsolescence, wear and tear, it's out of date. You know, somebody else come up with a better mousetrap. It recognizes that. When we buy an asset into the company, we buy a tractor, we buy a copier, we buy a warehouse. We don't get to expense that, do we? We don't. It's not an operating expense. It's not a cost of goods sold. So we make $1 million in a company in a year. That's our taxable income. We spend $900,000 on a piece of equipment. we might think, gosh, we should only have $100,000 of taxable income. No, we have $1 million of taxable income. Because that $900,000 of tractor or whatever it was we bought isn't an expense. An expense is rent. An expense is marketing budgets. Once we've paid the rent and used the space for that month or whatever it is, we have no claim on that space any longer, do we? Once we use the utility that comes through the electric line or the gas line or the internet line, we don't have anything left, do we? That's an expense. But I buy a tractor, at the end of the year, the tractor still sits there. I can use it in the next year, and the next year, and the next year. But we know, excuse me, we know the tractor has reduced in value if for no other reason than it's a year old now, or we've been using it up, or somebody's come up with a better tractor. So we transfer the value of the tractor from the balance sheet to the income statement through depreciation expense. So over time, we get to expense the entire book value cost of the tractor over time, which time is supposed to be commensurate with how long that tractor is going to have a useful life for our business. That's depreciation. What's amortization? Depletion of value for an intangible asset. So Alex buys software. Alex buys patent to a pharmaceutical. These are intangible assets, right? But they are valuable assets nonetheless, and they have a cost. There's a book value to them. He gets to depreciate those over time, and we call that type of depreciation amortization. EBITDA is earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization. So if this is EBITDA, then we've just essentially outlined that depreciation and amortization are part of OpEx. We're going to add them back. We add them back because we took them out as operating expenses. How is it that depreciation is an operating expense? I understand how rent's an operating expense. I understand how utilities, insurance, wages are operating expenses. How is it that depreciation is an operating expense? Okay. I've actually had accountants give me that argument. And in fact, some of them with that argument have said, since it doesn't matter where I put it, I'm going to put it down below. And I say, you're wrong. I'm not an accountant. I'm not a CPA. I don't have an accounting degree. And I'm right, as it turns out. Not because I've got a PhD, but because I've thought it through. And you can too. So Rod, you own a printing company, right? You do now. Okay. You picked up on this story. I like that. So your printing company prints books, posters, flyers, materials, right? You have a printing press. In fact, you have a bunch of them. They cost you several $1 million combined. They are the fixed assets you're depreciating. Okay? Without the printing presses, how much product can you print and sell? None. So the expense resulting from the printing press, which is strictly relevant to your operation, that must be an operating expense, mustn't it? If it comes from the operation, it has to be an operating expense. Without the printing press, there is no operation. It uses the printing press to create revenue. Depreciation is an operating expense.
And what about the amortization?
Okay, so you have in your business, you've got one of these funny Russian Jordanian businesses, by the way, which frankly, I don't really understand them, but I understand there was some really good drug money running through them at a point, so we're going to capitalize on that. By the way, he and I work together a lot. I'm going to harass him. I'm going to harass him because we're friends and we work together a lot. Okay. I'm not really harassing them. We're teasing each other, and they give it back to me in spades when they feel like it. Okay. So you've got a business, and your business has you bought a bunch of software. You paid $100,000 for a 5-year license on a really complex CRM system. 5-year license. That's the key here, right? It'll last for 5 years. You also happen to own a patent on something that you developed in your business years ago, but you no longer use in your business. Your business is now a human resource business. At a time, some of the humans that you were employing were scientists. They developed something, created a patent, and it's not your business line really. It's not part of your operation, but you happen to own one. Fair enough? Okay. the amortization that results from his ownership of that CRM system, non-tangible asset, is an operating expense.
In this case. but-
In this case,
Just because he wrote a program and didn't use it.
well, no, he's using the program, he's
Okay.
using the CRM. It's part and parcel of running his business. Without it, he couldn't run his business like he runs it. That's an operating expense. But the patent that he owns, he just happens to own from something that happened years ago, maybe, or maybe he took it in a trade for something, or who knows how he got it. It's not an operating asset, is it? He's not in the business of creating patents with science. He happens to own it. That would be a non-operating asset. So if there's amortization from that intangible asset, that would not be an operating expense. So the issue becomes, is the asset that we are depleting its value, is it an operating asset or not? So I have a business, and when I say this kind of thing, you have to know I'm being facetious, I'm just giving you hypotheticals, right? So I had a business, very successful business. It's an investment company, a private equity firm. We've got some property up in Idaho. We've got a beautiful lodge, and I have that lodge and property owned by my business. My business is an investment in a private equity firm. I have it owned by the business because I like to write off all the expenses. And if I owned it personally, I'm not allowed to do that, right? Now, I tell the IRS that you good guys who are my senior executive VP, whatever's, you guys go up there and you take our customers, you take our best employees, you take our salespeople, and we use this as a corporate retreat. That's the utility of my lodge. Well, I don't tell them that I allow you to do that one evening a year. The rest of the year, don't even think about coming to my lodge. It's my lodge, but I'm going to write off the expense. Is that an operating asset? It's not really. It's a non-operating asset. Now, if I'm being honest with myself, any of the expenses resulting from it, including its depreciation, is going to be a non-operating expense. It doesn't matter for tax purposes if it's operating or non-operating, because the depreciation and amortization amounts are going to come out before taxable income either way. So be willing and able to differentiate operating from non-operating, and any expense that results from an operating condition or asset is an operating expense. Any expense that results from a non-operating condition or non-operating asset is a non-operating expense. And non-operating expenses are going to come down here below EBIT. In fact, they're the next thing that we would deduct. But because they're not part and parcel of the operation, we're not going to think about them or include them in cash flow from the operation, unless we're told that those assets go together as part of the operation. Okay? Does that make sense? Just keep it in mind. It's either operating or not. If somebody is acquiring the whole thing, including the non-operating assets, then you have to consider those expenses. If they just want the operation, Rick's Dry Cleaners. Rick's Dry Cleaners has the presses, it's got the lines, and all these things, but Rick's Dry Cleaners happens to own my Corvette. If I sell you Rick's Dry Cleaners, I promise you, you're not getting my Corvette. It's staying in my garage. It's a non-operating asset. We're not going to consider any expenses or cash flow resulting from it. Okay? This is the first big building block of cash flow. From here, I want to think about something called no pat and no plat. No pat is net operating profit after tax. And the taxes we're talking about, by the way, are income taxes. There are some taxes that are operating expenses, right? Payroll taxes, sales taxes, use taxes, property taxes. Those are operating expenses if they result from operating activities or assets. So when we talk about earnings before interest and tax, this tax is income tax, state and federal income tax, not employment tax, not sales tax, not use taxes. Okay, those are operating expenses. No pat, net operating profit, which by the way is EBIT after taxes. So this is EBIT minus our tax expense. Pardon?
EBI.
EBI, same thing, EBI, yeah. Same thing, and you see that term sometimes. That's a relatively recent term for me. I didn't see that 10 years ago.
I see EBT
Mhm.
more than EBI.
Yeah, right, earnings before tax. Which supposes interest has already come out as well as an expense. No plat, net operating profit less adjusted tax. Well, here's the thing. Is EBIT a dollar value that we expose to a tax rate? Or is taxable income a dollar value that we expose to a tax rate? What do you think?
Say it again.
Is EBIT, which is right here, a dollar amount that we expose to a tax rate? Or is taxable income? So I would tell you, as we continue on the income statement stack, we would separate out. This thing. We would separate out I don't know why that's not blue. Non-operating expenses. That then is going to result in taxable income. We would now separate out any tax paid, income tax paid. That's going to result in net income. Okay, so we don't expose EBIT as a value, a number, to a tax bracket to figure out our tax liability, do we? Unless there are no non-operating expenses. And the most common type of non-operating expense is interest expense. And we'll talk about why that is in a moment. We'll kind of challenge it for a minute because it's a little counterintuitive. Okay. No plat and no pat operate off of EBIT. No plat is EBIT. Now it's good. Sometimes times 1 minus a tax rate. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about not behaving. So EBIT times 1 minus tax rate. That, by the way, is the same thing as EBIT minus EBIT times tax rate. Same thing, right? Just a different algebraic construct. It's not just a different order. Net operating profit less adjusted tax supposes that this tax adjustment and this tax amount that we might pay may be two different dollar values. What's the current state and federal income tax rate in this country for business income?
26.
Approximately 26%, 21% federal, and approximately 5% state. In Utah, it's 4.95%. In other states, it's as little as 0. Some it's as high as like 7, 8, or 9, something like that. Okay. So this tax that we pay, is that necessarily simply a function of the tax rate that we're exposing our taxable income to? Alex, your company's got $100,000 worth of taxable income. At a 26% tax rate, that would be $26,000, right? But as it turns out, your company only paid $10,000 in income tax. How might that possibly happen? What are some of the things that might occur for his company to only pay $10,000 in income tax when there's a 26% rate and he had $100,000 of taxable income? Lots of possibilities. What are some of them?
So he did the fraud, first option.
He did what?
He did a fraud.
So he had a little Jordanian Roman
Yeah.
Russian thing going on here? Okay, all right, cool.
He
So
did
you
that
this is the count.
Let's assume he's an honest and integrous guy.
honest. He will increase that.
I just finally said that.
Yeah, he's spent.
He will increase that depreciation and add some in.
No, those are already accounted for over here. Think about this. He's the CEO of the company. He's the owner of the company. We are his vice presidents, his key people. Alex, at our level of play, we expect annually to be able to have a new luxury vehicle. BMW.
Put all his taxes, he put all his money, he buy a new car for
Well, but
$100,000 and he put this car on the.
well, but that's going to be over here.
It's like,
It's already.
But hang on, hear me out, hear me out. You'll understand here in just a moment. I'm going to use a magical term that will, all this will reconcile. So he decides he wants to do this. You've decided you want a BMW. You've decided you want an Audi. I don't know what it is that you want, but it's certainly not a Yugo. What do you got there? BMW as well. I want a Tesla. What is different about me wanting a Tesla to his taxes than the Audi and the BMWs they want?
Some stuff from taxes, it's an electric vehicle.
Well, it's not the deduction I'm after here, Rob, but you're really, really close. Tax credit
Tax credit.
is a tax credit. So in this case, there's a $7,500 federal tax credit, and I think we're still about $2,400 state or something like that. That tax credit is a direct offset to his tax liability. Maybe he really had a $26,000 tax liability, but he only paid $10,000 in taxes because he had some tax credits. Maybe he had a tax loss carry forward from a prior period. Maybe he had worked into some special arrangement to get some tax forgiveness because he moved his business to Juab County from Sandy and they gave him some tax offsets or something like those. Those were non-operating decisions, weren't they?
It's not separate.
Yeah, they're not operating. Now, he maybe needs to give us senior people luxury cars because that's part of our compensation package expected.
Not a dumb question, but
Oh.
spreading your losses over certain years, would that be considered also tax credits or would that?
Not tax credits, those would be loss carry forwards.
Okay.
And we're gonna deal with those at a point. I don't
Would that
think
be one
tonight.
of those?
You can do that.
Absolutely.
So in this.
In this scenario.
part,
Maybe last year he had a tax loss and he didn't get to use all of it, so he moved some of it forward to this year. It protects some of his taxable income. So he didn't pay 26,000, he only pays 10,000. There's lots of little things that are not related to this year's operation. His operation doesn't care. His operation where he's selling athletic shoes, he's making and selling athletic shoes. It doesn't care if it has executives that are credible, quality, and knowledgeable like we are, that have Teslas versus BMWs. It cares that it has credible, knowledgeable executives. And credible, knowledgeable executives in this market of his include being given a luxury vehicle to drive. Not always, I'm just being hypothetical, right? He's saying, "Are you kidding me? I want a Maserati." I can tell right just by the look on his face. So the operation, the shoes don't care. But if I chose a Tesla, or he said, "I'm getting all of you Teslas," he met the condition for our compensation package, and he created an additional benefit that's not relevant to the operation. It happens to be benefiting him now. It's got nothing to do with making shoes. So when we are looking backwards, so we're looking into the, now it's going to use the eraser. When we're looking backwards, we're going to use no PAT because we know how much tax we paid, right? We don't have to guess. Looking backwards, we're going to use no PAT. EBIT minus the tax paid. When we're looking forwards, we're going to use no PLAT. We're going to project the EBIT, and we're going to then apply that to a tax rate for business. In this case, unless you're told it's different, you're going to assume it's 26%, 21% federal, 5% state. If you're told it's the state of Utah, it's 21% federal, 4.95% state. That's the only state I'll give you the actual number for because frankly, I haven't memorized the others. Okay. These are cash flow items, right? No PLAT or no PAT, EBIT is this first building block of cash flow. We subtract out the tax, so we got to pay the tax. We paid it, it's a cash flow item, right? These are cash flow items. Are we good so far? Okay, I want to go to a particular type of cash flow called free cash flow. I want to explain what free cash flow means first, though. Free cash flow is the cash flow that results from a company's operation that the owners, the equity stakeholders, can use for the benefit of growing the company or paying to the equity stakeholders or satisfying other claims against the company, cash flow claims against the company. Okay. So you're going to notice here a couple of things. I'm not going to include distributions or dividends in this equation because this results in the cash flow that we might have available to pay dividends and distributions. I'm not going to use interest expense. I'm not going to use debt principal payments because it results in the number that I must then perhaps use to make some of those claims, fill some of those claims, if those claims exist. But I'm going to use a lot of other things here. Okay, and you'll understand each of them. So this starts with, if we're looking forward, and in our class, 99.9% of the time, we're going to be looking forward. So we're going to use no plat, which remember was EBIT times 1 minus a tax rate. Okay, so I'm going to give you the same equation here, abbreviated, here, elongated. Okay, but it results in the exact same thing because it's the same equation. Fair enough? All of this, by the way, is in the corporate finance quick sheets and in the comparative metrics guide and all kinds of other stuff. So I want cash flow. There's some expenses here that we took out before we got to EBIT, didn't we?
Yeah.
That are non-cash expenses. We don't write a check for depreciation or amortization. It's a non-cash expense. And because of that, got to put it back. So if we have a non-cash expense taken out before getting to EBIT, we have to put it back to get to the cash flow because it was a non-cash expense. Okay. In our class, I will more often than not generalize depreciation and amortization simply by calling it depreciation or D. Okay, but recognize it might mean both. Okay, so what are some of the other cash flow items? So we know we have cash flow from operations, cash flow from investing, cash flow from financing. Cash flow from operations. We have to think about the operational elements of the company. I think you can realistically expect that EBIT, depreciation, and tax, those are all relevant to the operation, right? Okay. If our company sells something that we inventory, put on a shelf, then buying inventory is an operating activity as well. If my inventory goes up from one period to the next, so I have $100,000 in inventory at the end of 2023, I have $120,000 of inventory at the end of 2024. I have more inventory on hand. Does that increase my cash flow for 2024, or does it decrease my cash flow for 2024?
It's increased for 2024.
Decrease.
Okay, why do you think it's decreasing?
Because it's inventory, it's a sitting, you don't make money, just sit over there.
Yeah, and think about it this way, Saif, I had to buy it.
Yeah.
What did I buy it with? Cash. Okay, so if my inventory goes up, it's an asset that went up, right? In fact, it's an operating asset because net working capital, which is current assets and current liabilities, net working capital is operation, part and parcel of my operation. I have inventory so I can sell it. I have accounts receivable because I've sold things to customers and given them terms. I have accounts payable or current liabilities because I bought things from vendors and they've given me terms. Those are net working capital, those are a result of my operation. Okay. So in this case, part of my operation is any change in inventory. Part of our operation is any change in accounts receivable. And if I have some other current assets, maybe as a category, it would be a change in those as well. Change in inventory, change in accounts receivable, change in non-cash current assets. The reason why I'm not including change in cash here is because I'm solving for cash flow. You don't include an input as both an input and as an outcome. That's called circular logic, right? Yep, exactly. So these would be the elements that would be relevant for my cash flow from my operation. I'll leave that right. I'll do this. if I have an investment company, we're helping people with stocks, bonds, mutual funds, etc., then stocks, bonds, and mutual funds might be investments for my company, right? If I'm buying them and selling them, okay, as a dealer. But my company's a printing company. Yeah, I've got $500,000 of cash sitting around. I don't need that much cash. And rather than distribute it out and face maybe some tax burdens, depending upon the structure of the company, maybe I want to keep it on the books of the company, but I don't want to keep it as cash because I earn 0.0% interest in my business savings checking account. So I decided to buy some Pacific Gas and Electric, some PG&E, 10-year bonds at a 9% rate. I just think I'm going to get a better rate on that than my cash, but I'm holding those bonds as a substitute for holding cash. I know if I need the money, I can go to E-Trade, I can press a couple of buttons, and within the 3 business days, cash is in my account, I'm good to go. I'm just holding it as a substitute for cash. That's not an investment for my printing company. A printing press is an investment for my printing company. A warehouse I can print from within. Trucks that I can deliver printing. So fixed assets that I'm utilizing to create revenue in my operation. Those are investments. So cash flow from operations or from investing is the change in gross fixed assets. So before depreciation. That's also referred to, by the way, as net capital spending. It's the same thing. Net capital spending or CapEx. Change in gross fixed assets, CapEx, net capital spending. They're all the same thing. Different terms. They are the exact same outcome. Yep, the exact same as that. Now, if you're looking at a balance sheet and it doesn't show gross fixed asset, it shows net fixed assets, and that means they've already been depreciated. Then to find this number, we simply add back depreciation and amortization.
We don't leave it separate and put the depreciation to the cash flow at the statement of operating and then cash flow on the financing.
Well, we may have it in both places, Saif. If we've got depreciation, if I understand what you're asking, and I might not, I apologize if I don't. If we've got depreciation as an operating expense, then we're going to have to adjust for it here because it was a non-cash expense. But when we're thinking about this, if we're reported on our balance sheet net fixed assets, if we don't see gross fixed assets, which some simple balance sheets don't have, then we have to recognize the net part of this is depreciation has already been taken out. You got to put it back. It was already taken out. So capital expenditure, CapEx, net capital spending, change in gross fixed assets, that all gets to how much did we spend in that period of time on investments, additional fixed assets that we plan to use in order to then go ahead and create revenue. Okay. Financing. So in this case, cash flow from financing. Oh, by the way, if we're buying fixed assets, does cash go up or down?
Cash go down.
Down.
Yeah.
We're buying inventory, cash goes down. We're extending more accounts receivable, which means customers haven't paid us that otherwise would have. Cash goes down, right? AR goes up, cash goes down because that's money we haven't yet collected and could have, should have.
Same side effect on the equation.
Say again?
Same side effect on the equation.
Well, I think in this case, if I understand what you're saying, that if the asset goes up, the cash flow goes down, that's negatively correlated. If the asset goes, or if the item goes up like a liability, the liability balance goes up and the cash flow goes up as well. I borrow $100,000 from Chris. He's my bank. My debt went up by $100,000, right? But my cash also went up because he gave me $100,000 when I borrowed it from him. I owe it back to him still, but that was a positive cash flow.
Same side.
Liabilities are negatively correlated with cash flow. Liabilities goes up. Excuse me, liabilities are positive. Excuse me. Liabilities are positively correlated with cash flow. Liabilities go up, cash flow goes up. Assets are negatively correlated with cash flow. Assets go up, cash goes down. Because we have to pay for the asset. Let that sink in for a minute. Not very intuitive. A liability goes up, so I borrow an extra $1 million from my friend Dimitri. Well, it's actually from that whole Russian thing we had going on here, right? So we borrow $1 million from Dimitri. I now owe him $1 million, but he gave me $1 million in cash. My debt went up, my cash went up. It's positively correlated, that's a liability. However, I buy a tractor from Chris. I have to pay for it. My cash goes down, but my asset went up. It's negatively correlated. Liabilities are positively correlated to cash flow. And assets are negatively correlated with respect to
That's
cash.
right, yeah.
Yeah, it is. I promise you it is. Whole PhD thing, yeah, it's right. All right. By the way, when I pull that out, it's because I'm playing, right? Okay, this time of night, I'm allowed to play. Been here since 6. Not PM. Okay, financing. So financing items are change in long-term debt. Change in,
Sales.
I'm gonna call it a paid in capital. Because I'm using a very generalized term. Paid in capital is buying common stock in the company. Paid in capital is any owner's financial contribution to the company for the equity account. Okay, that's paid in capital. Has lots of other terms. Common shares, lots of things. Okay. Well, these are the 3 items that result in cash flow, but not free cash flow. Free cash flow is a very particular element, so let's go back to it. So my free cash flow equation, I'm looking forward. No plat plus depreciation minus change in net working capital minus net capital spending. So we just calculated, we just thought about net capital spending. Where was it? I went the wrong way. Right here. I said change in gross fixed assets, CapEx, net capital spending, they're all the same thing. So we're going to subtract it. Okay. We're going to subtract the change in net working capital to come up with free cash flow. Net working capital, then, and I need to think about this parenthetically. So let me do it like this. So minus current assets for time 1 minus current current liabilities for time 1 minus current assets for time 0 minus current liabilities time 0. That is the change in net working capital. So the ones simply are trying to reference some period of time. And in this case, time 1 came after time 0, right? And to find the change from then to now, we're going to take the number now and subtract from it the number that was in the past. That gives us the change. We subtracted this number in the past from the most recent number. That gave us net working capital. Net capital spending is going to be either the change in gross fixed assets or the change in net fixed assets plus depreciation. Sorry, I showed you on the other screen. Okay, so I recognize this point in the evening. You understand every word I'm using. You're not sure you know what I'm talking about. And you're tired enough that you frankly don't care. Have I pretty much hit it on the head? Okay. So I want to go through one more item. It's simple, I promise you. And it's related to these items. And then we're going to call it quits for the night. Fair enough? But do you have any questions about where we've been so far? And by the way, we're gonna trace every one of these steps at least one more time, not tonight. At least one more time, some of them many times, not tonight.
Might be stupid, but
No,
is it OCF minus account receivable 1 minus account receivable 0, same as this or no?
no. because what you just described did not include net capital spending. You might have structured everything up to net working capital, but you didn't include net capital spending.
So
OCF is operating cash flow, by the way, just so you know.
this is new, this one is one.
Yeah, so and by the way, I want you,
But generally,
No.
we use this all the time.
we are gonna use this a grundle. I want you to commit this to memory. You're going to find in some of the material I've given you that there are multiple ways of coming up with this number. We'll talk about them in the future. But this is what I want you to use, unless I say use an alternative approach, which I think I only do once in this class. And it's in one of the early assignment sets. Okay? I want you to memorize that. No plat. So net operating profit less adjusted tax, which is EBIT times 1 minus the tax rate, plus adding back into it depreciation and amortization, because EBIT included a deduction for those things, minus the change in net working capital, minus net capital spending. Put that in your mind, sear it, close your eyes, see it on the inside of the eyelids. You're going to have to repeat it numerous times. I will get to a point where I will look at one of you and say, give me the equation for free cash flow. Not just for the sake of the equation itself. I know if I can get you to think in these terms, you can recognize immediately the difference between cash flow and income. Income is net income. It's this right down here. Has nothing to do with changes in inventory. Has nothing to do with changes in accounts receivable or current liabilities. Doesn't take into account any capital equipment purchases. Doesn't take into account any debt repayments. It only takes into account interest expense that are some of those kind of other things, right? This is not cash flow. Not understanding the difference between income and cash flow can let your business die on the vine of indigestion. Not cancer, indigestion. Losing money is cancer. Indigestion is running out of cash, even if you're profitable. Growth in your businesses takes cash. Buying more inventory, buying more equipment, investing in people and things takes cash. You can have a highly profitable business that dies from a lack of cash because you grew through all the cash flow. Okay. And that is so common to startups, right? That is a startup's plight. That's why they need investment. Okay. All right. There's a lot of things we could do. I want to just look really briefly at invested capital and ROIC. Invested capital, and again, there are a couple of different equations you're going to see for invested capital in the material I've given you. I want you to use one of them. One, unless I tell you to use the others. And that one is fixed assets. In this case, it's net fixed assets. Net fixed assets. Plus net working capital. And net working capital is current assets minus current liabilities. Okay, that's invested capital. Well, what does that mean? It's the capital that we have invested in the company's operation. That money to buy those fixed assets came from somewhere, right? The money we've got tied up in net working capital came from somewhere. It either came from money that we borrowed, or it came from money that came in from equity investors, or it came from accumulated retained earnings. That's it.
This have to be from operations. Always.
Well, good question, as it turns out. I guess we could parse out a company that has operating assets and non-operating assets. In which case we might parse out operating invested capital and non-operating invested capital. By and large, in our company, in our assignments, we won't do that. Okay. In the assignments that you have, just pay attention to the wording of the assignment. I don't seek to make them tricky at all. And to the extent that they may not be plain and obvious, that's just my inability to communicate them plainly and obviously. Okay. Return on invested capital is no PAT divided by invested capital if we're looking backwards, or it's no plat divided by invested capital if we're looking forward, which suggests that we can forecast no plat. We can forecast revenue, we can forecast cost of goods sold, we can forecast operating expenses, we forecast EBIT, we can forecast taxes, right? We forecast no plat. And it also suggests we can forecast invested capital. So we're going to look at how to forecast invested capital, not tonight. Okay. In fact, I don't even, it might be next week, but I don't think so. Let me see. Nope, it's not next week either. It's 2 weeks from now. Okay, so what we didn't talk about is market value of debt and capital asset pricing model. You will find that in order to complete the assignment that I've given you for tonight, which is the math of value creation, it's a problem set, and the first Excel assignment, you need to understand market value of debt, and you need to understand capital asset pricing model. You can get through about 90% of the spreadsheet. You get through about 90%, maybe 75% of the problem set. Do that work, come next week having done that, and then we'll go ahead and pick up from where we left off here, which will take you through the rest of the assignment set. That'll answer a bunch of questions. We'll simultaneously answer questions you might have getting through what you've gotten through. Just recognize when it comes to market value of debt items, anything with bonds, anything to do with calculating of return on equity, calculating the cost of equity, excuse me. We're going to use the capital asset pricing model for that. And I just don't want to try to do it tonight. There's, based on the looks on your faces, it's not going to sink in. That's okay. I get that. I really get that. Any questions that you have any sense of how to articulate? I know you have many of them. You just don't know how to.
I mean, I have a lot.
You just don't know how to ask them, right?
Yeah, I mean, I have to start practicing.
Yes, you do.
And I will-
So through the week, you can utilize your study group. Through the week, if you're working on the problem sets or Excel, and there's something you think, gosh, I know we covered this. I just didn't get the connection. Put a question out on WhatsApp. Okay. WhatsApp helps us learn. Your study groups help us learn. Hopefully, our Monday nights together will help you learn. Hopefully. That's my goal. Are we good? We've begun to build the first worksheet in your model. By the time we finish your model, you'll be able, which will be weeks away still, you'll be able to use that model to help you understand how to make decisions, pure objective financial decisions. Whether it's buying a company, investing in something in your company, or what have you. Fair enough? Okay, are we good? Go away. Thank you. Pardon me?
What did you say we needed to know for the week one assignment?
So virtually everything we've gone through, by the way.
Okay, you said you
And-
mentioned something at the end.
Yeah, so there's some things I didn't tell you. I didn't tell you about market value of debt.
Okay.
And I didn't tell you about capital asset pricing model, which Jeremiah, we use the capital asset pricing model to calculate WACC, and we use it to calculate the cost of equity. We will do all of that next week. Catherine, I don't know if you're actually there, if you're just recording. Are you there?
No, I'm here. Hi.
So I apologize. I didn't even think about you being there. I didn't throw any questions to you.
No, you're good.
I recorded this, and if
Thank you.
me a message, either email or WhatsApp or text, I will then remember to send you a link to the recording.
I'll text you after this. I appreciate
Sure.
it.
You doing okay, sis?
Yeah, I'm glad I stayed home because I would have been a disruption to the class for sure.
You gonna live?
I'll definitely live, sir. Yep.
Okay, good enough. All right, we'll
All
see
right.
you next week.
Yeah. See you. Bye.